Welcome to Post Games, a podcast about how and why we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant, and I am so happy to have you here for the first annual Earliest Game of the Year Awards, aka the EGOTYs. This isn't the most spectacular award show, it's certainly not the most exhaustive, but it is, as the name claims, the earliest. And that's the point. The beauty of the EGOTYs is found in its limitation to the first 5 months of the year, with winners selected before the Summer Game Festival and all the major fall releases. Instead, the EGOTYs celebrate games that most often are forgotten or overlooked when the Game of the Year voting begins in the fall. Once viewed as a publishing black hole, the first half of the year has become an exciting season for games really of every size. Major studios like Capcom have made the first quarter their preferred landing zone for huge releases, while indie studios hope players buy small new games to counter the winter doldrums. According to SteamDB, over 10,500 games have been released on Steam in 2026, and it's only the middle of June. So how do the EGOTYs work? Well, it's actually really simple. There's no voting. Instead, I've invited over 40 critics, designers, directors, reporters, authors, and comedians to share their individual picks for EGOTY. Because some people are bound to pick the same game, I prompted them as follows. Tell folks a little about how your EGOTY works, but more importantly, share a specific single detail, a design choice, a stage, a character, a story moment that makes the game so memorable. So, yes, you will hear multiple people praise Marathon and a couple of other games, but never in the same way, because even when we all love the same games, we love them for our own special reasons. Patreon supporters, don't worry, I got something special for you too. You will also hear a bonus segment right in the middle in which I share my top 10 games from the first half of 2026, and I dig into what about them has stuck in my heart, my brain, and my gut. This is, by far, the biggest post-games episode to date, so I won't hold you for much longer, but I just want to say, if you value big projects like this, please consider supporting the show. That could be subscribing to the Post Games Patreon for $5 to unlock tons of bonus segments and episodes. That could be leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, or it could be sharing this episode in your favorite gaming Discord or group chat. Thank you so much for joining me for the first annual EGOTYs. I'll hand the mic over to the guests.
Hello, Post Games. This is Greg Miller from Kinda Funny, a longtime fan, first-time caller. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here to talk about the one, the only mixtape. Yes, it is a lightning rod of controversy currently on the internet if you wanted to go look for it. But more importantly, I think you'd find so many thoughtful, critical analysis of it and why it works for some people and doesn't work for others, and why it's a 10 out of 10 for some people, and why it just misses what it's going for in the eyes of others. But for me, mixtape is a 10 out of 10. Mixtape is a masterpiece. And really, it comes down to I'm the perfect age for this game to hit me with all of the nostalgia. And I do believe that it works for every generation to some degree, but that, late 80s, early 90s, like I lived all of that. And I remember being in your friend's room, and I remember killing times in BSing and looking through old photos and having all these memories. But to just say it's nostalgia, I think would sell mixtape so short on, of course, why it resonates and why I think it's my standout of 2026. And really, I think it comes down to Stacey Rockford. I've been shocked with so much of the discourse going around that people find Stacey Rockford to be annoying, to be cruel, I should say, to be a bad guy in some respects. I see so much of myself in Stacey. Stacey is this character who is motivated by one singular goal, and that is to get out of this town and go to New York and meet her idol and become a music supervisor, right? And that mirrors me so much, with the exception that I wanted to go write about video games. I wanted, when high school was over, I was so ready to be done with it and go to college and get a journalism degree and come back to the burbs of Chicago and write for EGM. Like, that has been my goal since the 4th grade. And so I saw so much of myself and my hubris at 18 in Little Rockford, as she has this perfect mixtape, this perfect plan. And there's this beautiful moment at the very end of the intro. Of course, I'm sure many people have played it. You know, you skateboard to Devo, you get introduced to Slater, get introduced to Cassie, introduced to the town. And then you pull up outside Stacey Rockford's house, and she lays everything out for you of what's going on and what's the perfect day going to be and what this mixtape is and partying that night. And at the end, she looks at the camera and goes, all right, we're going to go hang out in my bedroom. And she goes, maybe for the last time. And she starts to walk, and she stops and looks back over her shoulder as that statement resonates and echoes in her head. And she kind of goes, huh, and then walks with it. When we were coming up on this game and it was a coming of age story and we saw it and we previewed it and yada, 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 it gave off so many pangs of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And obviously that's very much there, including a chase scene throughout a bunch of backyards and cookouts. But for me with Ferris Bueller, I never felt like Ferris Bueller felt like a real person. I felt like he had all that hubris of the unstoppable teen, but never the comeuppance, never the self-realization, never the check from his friends that, hey, you aren't invulnerable. And I know that there literally is a conversation in Ferris Bueller about that, but I never felt like it resonated with Ferris. I didn't feel like it changed Ferris Bueller. And I think as you go off on this journey and understand who Stacey Rockford is, there's so many beautiful little moments where her and Slater look back at what their life was like before Cass, where we see, I'm not going to spoil stuff, I guess, but a falling out between Stacey and Cass. Cass calls her out on, the fact that they had this whole road trip planned and Stacey's blowing that all up to go to New York and chase something that's so personal to her. And we see these friendships, ebb and flow throughout the story and change and do all these different things. But at the end, I am going to spoil it here. Sorry. Go play Mixtape if you haven't. At the end, we see Stacey do what I'm so glad she did, which is not change her plan. She goes through this day. She has these ups and downs, but ends in a beautiful place with her friends and then goes into her house to wake up in the morning and fly to New York City. Like, I was not concerned, but I was definitely prepared for a super sweet, saccharine ending where, you know what? She tears up the plane ticket. She climbs out into the car with her friends and they road trip down to Southern California like they had planned before this plan came about. And instead, no, Stacey says, I'm going to New York and I'm going to live my dream. I'm going to chase that. And I thought that was so powerful and so good to see her grow and change and be hurt in this story and realize the damage she's done to her friends, which she ignored because she was so self-centered on it. But in the end, still go, I have to chase my future. And that's what I had to do at one point too, leaving all my friends and family behind to go far away and start fresh. And that really resonated with me. And I think Mixtapes is just a beautiful reflection on that, not even time of your life, not even nostalgia, but that day you get to live once. That last day with your friends before you enter into a brand new universe.
Hi, this is Nina Freeman, indie game developer, and I'm here to share with you the game that I think is coolest so far from 2026. So the game I picked is called Transfer Point. It's by Robot Spacer. I know Robot Spacer from Twitch. He actually streamed the development of this game on Twitch, and I believe the chat actually helped him build it at times too, which is super cool. Transfer Point, it's a point and click text parser adventure, very old school style. It's like a mystery game. It's got cool exploration, old houses. You even interact with an old school email interface. It's awesome. There's a scary egret. But something I think is really, really cool about this game, other than it being wonderful, is that he made it in the 1986 World Builder software for Macintosh. Evidently, he used this when he was younger, like a kid, to make games too. So sort of a revisitation of an old tool. And I just think it's so wonderful and amazing to play a game made in a retro tool, but like it was made in 2026 and you can play it in 2026 in your browser. So, and I think it also runs on old Macs, or so he says. I haven't tried that myself, but like just the fact that you could do that is so cool. So yeah, if you're into those kinds of old text parser games, mystery games, adventure games, this is definitely one to check out. And yeah, shout outs to Robot Spacer for making a game in World Builder in 2026. What the heck? It's awesome. That's it. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Kirk Hamilton here. I make the music podcast Strong Songs and the video game podcast Triple Click. And it's pretty easy for me to pick the most memorable game that I've played so far in 2026. That game is Cairn, the rock climbing game from early in the year made by the Game Bakers. I haven't been able to get this game out of my head. It is truly a remarkable achievement. I've played a lot of games with climbing in them recently, notably Jusant, which was a very cool game about climbing from a couple of years ago, and Death Stranding and Death Stranding 2 are also games that I really appreciate for how much they feel like actually moving through nature. You're not doing that much straight up rock climbing in the Death Stranding games, but there is that feeling of carrying a heavy backpack and looking down over difficult terrain and really having to think about what your body is going to do. And I think that's what's so effective about Cairn. It puts me in the body of this protagonist, and it makes me feel such empathy. Not really emotional empathy, even though I do feel emotional empathy for Ava, the protagonist of Cairn. I feel a physical empathy for her. I was so tense and exhilarated, so exhausted, emotionally and almost physically exhausted by parts of this game because of how effectively Cairn channels the feeling of rock climbing. I am a terrible rock climber. I've done it a few times. I'm kind of just not built right for rock climbing, I guess. I don't know. It's not my sport, but I know enough about it to have a slight sense of how it feels when you're up against the wall and you're looking up, trying to figure out your next move and just feeling like, okay, there is no way for me to do this. I really appreciated Ava in those moments because she's a phenomenal athlete and she can do things that I couldn't even dream of doing. But there were so many times where I could feel her pushing up against the limits of what I was asking her to do. And I found myself talking to the screen saying, come on, you can do it. All right. Good job. And then occasionally you'll set your hand in the right place and pull yourself up to the right angle. And she'll sort of say, good, or she'll breathe a little bit of relief. And I felt almost as though she was talking back to me and we were having this conversation. It's hard to describe, but anyone out there who's played this game knows what I'm talking about. It's a game that asks you to embody the physicality of its protagonist in a way that I've never really encountered in a game before. And as a result, I just can't stop thinking about it. It's got beautiful production design, the sound design, Martin Stieg Anderson, who worked on those Playdead games, Limbo, and Inside. He worked on this game and as the audio designer, so it has incredible sound effects. It's so effective at placing you in this moment. And I just found it to be meditative. It absorbed me completely at a time where I was feeling really stressed out by a lot of different things. And I really needed a game that could just fully occupy my attention. And Cairn did that incredibly effectively. So yeah, Cairn is easily my favorite game of 2026 so far. And I think that you all should play it.
Hello, this is Adam Conover. My favorite game of 2026 so far is Mini Shoot Adventures. This game first came out a couple years ago, but it just came out this year on Switch and Switch 2 for the first time. And oh my God, this game is such a delight. It's a top-down shooter on a Zelda-style map, which is super fun to explore. But most importantly, this game just has the best game feel of almost any game I've ever played. Shooting the little ships feels so good. When your shots hit them, it goes like tuk, 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 tuk. And when they shatter, they're like, tsh. If you've played this game, you understand. As soon as I turned it on, it would just sort of lower my blood pressure and chill me out and make me feel good. And that is what I want from a video game. Mini Shoot Adventures, check it out.
Hi, my name is Winnie Song, and I'm a game design professor at NYU Game Center. The game I want to talk about today is Marathon, which is a spiritual successor to a game series of the same name by the same studio, released from 1994 to 1996. At a glance, it's just an extraction shooter from the game studio Bungie. It's set in a future 900 years from now on a faraway planet that humans failed to colonize. And I think it's a game that also features some of the best graphic design in video games I've ever seen. But at its heart, it's a game, I think, about the fantasy of clawing for everything you ever get, tooth and nail, and the privilege of feeling that you got it, not because you deserved it or earned it, which is this like capitalistic fantasy that shooters tend to sell, but because you were at the right place at the right time with the right people on your team. And I think it's a game that doesn't lie about the wrong things in the world, right? Where, that you can like own or keep anything in this life, be it tools or your money or even our own bodies, all of which we lose at the end of every failed run in this game. But I think it is a game that lets you feel some kind of like ownership over your own struggle, which I do think is a real luxury in this day and age. But the specific design choice I do want to talk about is how the story of Marathon, that began back in the games from 1996, which is now like decayed by 30 years of entropy in this age of information, that have been kind of kept intact only by these like dedicated fans and archivists in these corners of the internet. It's now being continued in this game, but it's only earnable by like extracting with these like useless objects in the world that take up a lot of space in your bag, where you could be keeping items that you actually need, like meds and bullets. But you do it anyway, or you try to, because I think all we can ever do to move forward in this world is to read stories and like listen and learn, because otherwise all that history was for nothing, right? And I think all we have is history. And I think that's the kind of power fantasy that this game sells, that we can gain and keep knowledge if we can get out with it, instead of just like getting frags and getting paid, which is the power fantasy that like a lot of these other shooters that I also enjoy playing tends to sell. And I think I've been, surprised by every run of this game, either by my like own actions or my opponents, but mostly by the stories that I get out with, by the skin of my teeth.
Hey, I'm Giovanni Colantonio, the editor-at-large over at Polygon, and I want to tell you about the coolest game of the year. Forget what everyone else is saying. This is the real sicko game for all of you out there. It is called Sol Sesto, and it is, stop me if you've heard this before, an indie roguelike dungeon crawler. But wait, it doesn't really look or play like any indie roguelike dungeon crawler that you've probably ever seen before. The idea of this game is that you have to go into a dungeon and clear a bunch of floors to find the sun, which is hidden underground somewhere. That's a simple enough premise, but when you look at the game and you look at screenshots, you'll see that you do that differently than you might expect. Every time you go to a floor, it is presented to you as a grid of rooms, and each room has a different thing in it. An enemy, a treasure chest, a trap, a healing item, something in there. And what you have to do is clear a certain amount of rooms to get to the next floor. But you can't actually pick which room you go into. You have to click on a row, and then you have a 25% chance of hitting one of the 4 rooms in that row. So if you see 2 treasure chests and 2 enemies, there's a 50% chance you're going to get treasure. There's also a 50% chance that you're maybe going to land on an enemy and take some damage depending on, what your character's defense is. Now that might sound very frustrating and like something you don't have much control over, but it's not, because the trick of Sol Sesto is that the roguelike build aspect of it is that you are manipulating the odds of going into rooms. So the upgrades you get aren't like +1 damage and things like that. You are getting upgrades that are like, hey, plus 30% chance that you're going to hit chests, but also plus 15% chance that you might hit traps. And that's going to mess with those 25% across the board equations on each row and make it so, now you actually have a 60% chance of hitting those chests and a 40% chance of hitting those enemies. It is brilliant, and it looks incredible. Hand-drawn art that looks unlike anything you've probably seen in a video game. It's fantastic. And I could talk a lot about the kind of genius of laying the risk-reward bare and just showing you the math. But the thing I actually love about it, and it's something that I didn't realize until recently, is that it reminds me of playing solitaire as a kid on a computer. And I know that's weird, but when I was growing up, I used to play, like solitaire and Free Cell or whatever, all of those games that would come pre-installed on my Windows PC. And I interacted with those games, I think, a lot differently than I interact with games now. I would just kind of sit down with a round of solitaire and play for a while, because I just kind of liked the act of playing solitaire. I wasn't really thinking about the progression. I wasn't really thinking about like getting the highest score or speed running my way to the end and seeing how fast I could do it. I would do that from time and time again. But I mean, really, I just liked playing solitaire. I liked the strategy of it. I liked clicking on the cards. It was really satisfying. It was just a really fun way to spend my time, and I didn't feel kind of a compulsion to play it or anything that was like forcing me along. And weirdly, Solcesto reminds me of playing solitaire, and I don't know what it is. It might just be the fact that the strategy is so simple, just in how you are kind of manipulating those odds. It might just be the fact that really the only way you interact with the game is by clicking. You're not doing attacks and having to have this high skill thing that you do. It's all in your head. And that just makes it so easy to sit down with it and just kicking around really quick. And sometimes you start a run and you lose immediately, and that's fine. And sometimes you start a run and you get really deep into it and it's really satisfying. And so I don't know what it is. I don't. There's a couple of things about it that I think remind me of it, but if you like a game that is just like the tactile pleasure of playing this game in a way that reminds you of playing a little PC solitaire, I think you'll dig Solcesto. And if you don't, you'll at least dig the fact that it's the coolest looking video game that has maybe ever been made. It's currently only available on PC as far as I know, but that's probably for the best, because if this was on mobile, I don't actually think I would probably play another video game for the rest of the year. I think I'd be set.
So this is Danielle Riendo from GameDeveloper.com and also the Berklee College of Music, actually, the game design program. The game I want to talk about that's been very, very special to me is Titanium Court, which just came out last month or so by AP Thompson. I played it on Steam. So Titanium Court is a very special game. It's a very interesting game. It has sort of a match 3 layer, just like a Bejeweled, or maybe I'm actually sort of aging myself there by saying Bejeweled, but it's like a match 3 layer where you sort of arrange your battlefields, and then it has an entire tactical layer. It's a really, really deep and interesting game, basically a tactics strategy style game with a surreal, kind of wacky, kind of playful, and sometimes very sad, very, very earnest narrative layer. I think what's incredibly special about it, and while I really, really think the interplay of mechanics and layers, sort of how well that battlefield match 3 mechanics speaks to the tactics layer, and that all fits into this world building and story, it's really the art direction that I want to highlight, and what's really, really set it apart for me. The game is presented in gorgeous pixel art with a limited but very evocative palette. It's really bright, and it's really, really sort of neon-hued and really, really, I think, quite beautiful and quite interesting. It suits the really playful and sometimes goofy, and again, sometimes really sad and very earnest and always very surreal narrative. So AP Thompson, who did most of the production on the game, really presents the world in this abstract kind of idea, these abstract 8-bit tiles, as well as in sort of neon-hued Atari 2600 style cutscenes, and with action-oriented GIFs for basically anything that happens on the battlefield. If something sort of especially action-oriented happens, there's like a sports or an action sort of GIF. It really evokes the early internet, but it does so in a really playful and sort of knowing and also kind of garish way. And I think that's actually quite special, especially for what's going on with the story, which I won't spoil, but I think it really is something of note. There's very memorable characters and scenarios, and everything always hints at much more detail than they ever display. And that really is the magic of pixel art, speaking as someone who really loves pixel art, and especially loves when it's used in an interesting or slightly different fashion or off-kilter fashion. I think this makes for a really rich world, and it complements and presents the hidden depth of the gameplay really almost perfectly. It's weird, but often so very close to the familiar. And this game is really special. It's something I think I'll be playing for years to come.
Hey everybody, my name is AP Thompson. I'm the creator of Titanium Court and the co-creator of Consume Me, which by the time you are listening to this will probably be out on iOS. So go check it out on your iPhone and or iPad. But I would like to nominate for early 2026 Game of the Year, Perfect Tides, Station to Station. If you are a listener of Post Games, you probably don't really need me to explain what this game is, but I will do so anyways. This is a point-and-click adventure game about a young woman who is attending college in the early 2000s in what is effectively New York City, even if it never actually calls it that. And allow me to also be just another person who is urging you to actually go and play this game. This game is incredible. The writing is some of the best writing that has ever been written in any video game ever. And if that is not enough to entice you to pick it up, maybe also consider that it is full of surprising and wonderful moments and interactions and gags and jokes that kind of hit you out of nowhere. Chris asked me to choose one to talk about here, a particularly memorable moment in this game, and there are so many of them that it is very difficult for me to narrow any of this down, particularly in ways that won't spoil the joke for you. So I guess I'm going to actually choose something relatively low stakes because it's not that much of a spoiler, but it still hit me pretty hard, which was when the character Mara goes online. She looks at a variety of things that you might look at on the internet in the early 2000s, including an analog to Pitchfork. But the thing that stood out to me is when she actually goes and watches an animation that is pretty clearly riffing on classic Homestar Runner / Strong Bad Emails. And the animation itself is hilarious. And the character's response to it, which can be summed up basically as, "Fuck, you will never make anything this good," just kind of had me in tears a little bit. This game is full of moments like that. There is a mini game that pops up at the very end of the game that continues to make me laugh when I am thinking about it. If you would like to know what that might mean in less vague terms than that, I recommend you go ahead and purchase and play Perfect Tides Station to Station. I played it on the Steam Deck. It works great on the Steam Deck. It doubtless works great on a normal computer too, and it is now out on Switch as well, and it probably is great on the Switch as well. So that is my recommendation.
Hi, my name is Ash Parrish, and I'm a freelance video game journalist whose work you can find on Aftermath, Kotaku, and my podcast, The Insert Credit Show. So my favorite game of 2026 so far is the mobile gacha game Love in Deep Space. It's made by the same creators of Infinity Nikki, and while technically Love in Deep Space released in 2024, I'm going to ask that you walk with me for a minute to explain why I picked this game instead of anything more recent. So at the beginning of 2026, I was laid off from my job as a games journalist at The Verge. I was blindsided and devastated by the news, and as a result, my relationship to gaming changed overnight. I couldn't play them anymore. Anytime that I would pick up a game that I thought I might enjoy, I just put it down 5 minutes later because I was just so repelled by the thought of playing video games. I was depressed and doubted myself. I doubted my entire career or if I would ever work in video game journalism again, exacerbated by the reality that video game journalism jobs just don't exist anymore. And as a result, I just kind of fell out of love with gaming. It had hurt me too bad, and I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. Into that mix stepped Love in Deep Space. I kept seeing these videos of impossibly sexy men doing incredibly suggestive things, and as someone who spent her career being unapologetically horny on main for video game characters, I thought, why not? It'd probably be something else I'd bounce right off of, but, the brand is the brand, and I had to try it for the brand. And strangely enough, I didn't bounce off of it. Love and Deep Space is a gacha game, and I'm not here to advocate for or against the concept of gacha games, but just know that it's designed to extract as much money from you as possible. You're grown, I'm grown, we can make grown decisions about our money, but just know that it's going to try to take from you as much as it can get. That aside, this game has me giggling and kicking my feet like a high schooler with her first crush. There are these 5 guys that you pursue relationships with, and the things they say to you and how they say it has just been such a boost to my confidence. I enjoy being awash in these over-the-top fantastical visuals of knights and mermaids and demons giving me their undivided attention. You can go on dates with them. You can go play claw machine together and win plushies. There's a house that you can decorate and take pictures with. There's a robust photo mode. You can do things like set timers to work out or study with them and even sleep with them. It's just so fun and so very catered to the female gaze of romance that I just love my time with it so much. There's even a period tracker that they have that you can tell one of your boys that you're on their cycle and they'll bring you like chocolates in a water bottle. It's just so cute. My favorite guy was the aloof and serious Dr. Zane before the older parts of me that fell in love with characters like Shishomaru, Sephiroth, and Yoko Kurama dragged me kicking and screaming to the game's bad boy, Silas. If you know, you know. And I know that none of the romance in Love and Deep Space is real. I know that this was designed to elicit this exact reaction in me, but after the devastation of getting laid off and questioning my entire self and my self-worth, a little Delulu self-indulgent fan service has been exactly what I needed.
This episode is brought to you in part by Incogni. As a video game journalist who has been doxxed a couple of times, I am constantly preaching the message of personal data hygiene. Every person, not just journalists, should be aware of how much of their personal information, phone numbers, addresses, health information, and more is available on the internet, and that those private details are being sold without your consent by data brokers and can be used for scams, harassment, and other illegal activities. The problem is so big and so widespread that you could lose entire days to finding who has your info, requesting that they remove it, and keeping these bad parties accountable. That is why I, my friends, recommend Incogni. The moment you subscribe and authorize removal, Incogni begins searching data brokers, online directories, people databases, and commercial databases. You get to watch it happen in real time on your dashboard. When I signed up, over 200 removal requests were sent instantly, and within 30 minutes, 60 requests had been completed. I've been using Incogni for months now, and I can see that they are keeping things up to date. They continue to keep me feeling safe and protected and keeping my info offline, exactly where I want it. After going independent and not being protected by a big publishing company, I began searching for the right data personal removal service. Incogni is exactly what I was looking for and has already brought me tremendous peace of mind. Frankly, time and time again, because I get emails regularly letting me know all the things they're doing to keep me safe. To get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan, go to incogni.com/postgames or click the link in the episode description. That is incogni.com/postgames. Summer always changes how I get dressed. I want pieces that feel lighter and more breathable, things that are easy but still put together. That's why I keep coming back to Quince. They focus on high-quality essentials that feel and look amazing. Think breathable linen and soft organic cotton, well-made basics but without the luxury markup. It's that rare balance where everything feels elevated but still, effortless. Quince European linen pants and shirts are the perfect warm weather upgrade to add to your rotation, starting at just $34. Their tees are soft and easy to wear, and their lightweight cotton sweaters are perfect for cooler summer nights. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality, not brand markup. Quince goes way beyond clothing, custom, upholstered sofas, ceramic cookware, premium bedding. It is the kind of brand you end up recommending to everyone for everything. Now, what am I using this summer? You know I am sticking with that 100% European linen, relaxed short sleeve shirt. I have been terrible about dressing like a grown-up for too long, and this is the simplest, cleanest, freshest way to get it done. No more just living exclusively in graphic tee world. I have upgraded, my friends, and I think that you'll want to do the same. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/postgames for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That is QUINCE.com/postgames for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/postgames.
Hello, everyone. This is Matt Apodaca from the Get Played podcast, and I want to talk to you a little bit about a game called Resident Evil Requiem. I played this on my PlayStation 5, and I'm sort of new to the Resident Evil franchise. Got in a long time ago at Resident Evil 4, and then as of this year, have played through Resident Evil 2 Remake, Requiem, and Resident Evil 3 Remake. So I'm trying to catch up because these games have absolutely taken over my brain in, I'd say probably a bad way, but they're so fun and so ridiculous and crazy and scary. And, you know, being scared is not my favorite feeling in the entire world, but when playing a video game or watching a movie, I do think it's a little bit fun. So in Resident Evil Requiem, you play as two characters. You play as Ashley, and those sections are really great because they're in first person, so they're very claustrophobic. It's just tight in on her perspective, and she's scared of everything. So that's the me part of playing the game. And then there are other sections where you get to be Leon, who we all know and love, Leon S. Kennedy, and he is a badass. He's an absolute king, and the number one himbo of all time, perhaps, and he just kicks ass, and it's in third person, so you just get to see him just destroy zombies and other creatures and all sorts of things like that. Spiders at one point. Some of the stuff is like, oh, there's like a big nemesis thing, or there's a Mr. X, and then sometimes it's just spiders, but Leon can handle it all. And there's a moment in Requiem that I absolutely love that I don't want to fully spoil, but this will be for those who know type of thing. But the moment when Leon gets a certain vehicle in this one particular section of the game might be an all-time video game moment for me personally, because of just how ridiculous it is and how fun it's having. That's the thing about these games, is that there are games that come out that are scary or whatever, and the vibes are horrendous. They're just bad vibes. The game wants to make you feel bad. These games, the vibes are pretty rock solid, actually. Like, they're pretty fun. It's just a good hang. And it's going to be hard, I think, to top right now. It's at the top of my list for games of the year of 2026, and going to have to work pretty hard to knock it down a couple rungs. But that's it for me. Thanks, Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Harper J. McIntyre. I used to be the senior critic at a video game website called Kotaku. I then went to work at a game studio called Double Fine Productions, where I helped with games like Keeper and Psychonauts 2. And now I'm a freelance writer again, just talking about games whenever I kind of feel like I want to, or if I want to make a little bit of pocket change, which means I can talk with you today. We're going to talk about our best/favorite games of 2026. I'm going to stick with favorite. And I'm really going to try and angle for something that I don't think anyone else is going to talk to you about. I'm sure people are going to mention Slay the Spire 2. I'm sure someone's mentioned Titanium Court. There's a lot to talk about with Marathon, which manages to pull off amazing storytelling in a strange, very confined genre. But today we're going to talk about a little game called The Legend of Heroes, Trails Beyond the Horizon. The Trails series of RPGs has been around since 2004. And that's one of the things that makes Trails Beyond the Horizon so interesting. It is the payoff of over 20 years of storytelling, which is something you don't find very often. You're not going to really get that in film, maybe in an MCU that lasts way too long. And it's not something you see on television. It's a more novelistic approach to storytelling, which is really focused on world building, letting you know who characters are, taking time with storylines, and finally in Trails Beyond the Horizon, there's huge payoff. The first game in the series is called Trails in the Sky. It was released in 2004. There's also a remake which came out last year, and it's a great way to get into the series if any of this interests you. But I want to talk about Trails Beyond the Horizon today. In many ways, the Trails games are very standard RPGs, mostly turn-based action, very melodramatic, some anime hijinks, shonen action. It's the world building that really matters. If you really dive into this series and stick with it, start from the start and go through, you are going to see locations change dramatically over the course of what's really like a 5 to 6 year period within the fiction. And that's the real draw of the series. It takes place in a world called Zemuria, which has undergone a recent magical sort of industrial revolution. And what starts with, hey, now there's cars on the roads instead of horses, and hey, now there's airships, has built in Trails Beyond the Horizon to mankind's first space flight. It's the first time they're going to put someone into space. And it becomes very clear that there is something waiting for humanity in space. And this is the payoff of 20 years worth of storytelling. And so you follow 3 different heroes, one of which is a private investigator. The other is a heretic hunter for the church. The other is a former war hero, now school teacher, who was the protagonist of one of the series' previous story arcs. And over the course of 3 days, these characters are going to travel the globe to unravel a grand mystery of what the hell is in space? What is this sort of manned mission actually about? And it's awesome. It's truly, truly good. In Japan, the title of the game is actually, it's Densetsu Kai no Kiseki, Farewell O Zemuria. And that's the real key there. This is sort of an ending point for the series. Not really. It's a cliffhanger. There's a huge cliffhanger that changes the stakes to a huge extent. But that title, Farewell O Zemuria, is very telling. It's a melancholic game. The music reflects this. The attitudes of the characters reflects this. Something is changing. Something is coming to an end. And I've never experienced video game storytelling like this, which has worked so hard to pay off so many threads and build to what I think is maybe the best narrative cliffhanger I've experienced in maybe any medium. It's very close. So if you like RPGs, if you like world building, if you like learning who characters are over decades of their lives, well, not decades, but quite a long period of time, this is the series for you. I don't think you should start with this one. You should probably do the Trails in the Sky remake. But if you stick with it, the reward for this series is incredible. So check it out. Trails Beyond the Horizon.
Hi, Chris, and hi to all of the Post Games listeners out there. My name is Austin Walker. I am a game designer and a critic. You might know me from podcasts back in the day, like the Giant Beast Cast or Waypoint Radio. More recently, I do a games podcast called Side Story. I also do the shows Friends at the Table, Shelved by Genre, and A More Civilized Age. So maybe you've heard me on one of those. If you've heard me on Side Story, you've already heard me talk about this game that I'm about to talk about, which is a game that technically didn't come out this year, though it got a big quality of life improvement at the beginning of this year. And it has 27 reviews on Steam as of my recording this. And so, I don't feel so bad recommending it, using this slot, saying it's the best game of the year or my favorite game of the year. It's certainly my favorite thing I've played this year, and easily one of my favorite things I've played that very few other people have in the last few years. It is called Island Off Outer Darkness. It takes place on an island across the bay off Outer Darkness, which is a big volcano in this fictional world where the game takes place. This is an independent game, mostly developed by one person named Zugarujic. You can find it on Steam for, I think, $14. It is a third-person narrative game with lo-fi aesthetics and just incredible atmosphere, incredible music. It is like I said, a narrative game that takes place over a number of in-game days. You play kind of a postal worker. You play a sort of interim postman who's arrived at this small fishing village on this kind of Antarctic island that is kind of equal parts Death Stranding and Annihilation. This is a game that has connections to things like Morrowind via the sort of keyword dialogue system, and the original Nier with its gardening simulation. There's a lot of trying to breed different types of flowers and vegetables in this game. But mostly what you're doing is walking around a small village, talking to really interesting people, slowly learning about the community on this island, learning about the wider world, which is a fantastical world with some interesting sci-fi and kind of grounded fantasy elements. It's a game that reminds me of things like Flower, Sun, and Rain by Suda51, Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, the works of Cosmo D or the Catamites, things like Disco Elysium in terms of its handling of kind of political ideas, questions of race and gender. These are things that feel lived and feel grounded in particular personal perspectives in this game. And you are kind of tossed into the middle of it. You meet people who have doppelgangers. You meet people who are caught up in strange ecological processes, and that sends them into kind of post-colonial radical political positions. You meet people who are just kind of assholes to you. You meet people who everybody else thinks they're cool, but they don't give you the time of day. And it's just kind of like, hey, why are you so mean to me? What did I ever do to you? This game does something I really love that's similar to something that you might find in games like Paradise Killer or Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, where you come to learn a small amount of space and you explore it over kind of an iteration of days. In some ways, it's similar in this way to even something like Majora's Mask. The spaces in this game are even smaller than that. And given the sort of tonal and visual style, you might even compare it to something like Umurangi Generations levels. It's a small island. There's a dozen people on it at maximum. But you come to learn okay, every day I'm going to go deliver my packages. I'm going to, climb this little ramp up into the hills so I can talk to the old woman who does all the plumbing in the neighborhood. I'm going to talk to the artist who's here who hates his own work and thinks he's kind of betrayed who he is and has kind of sent himself into self-exile here on this island. And in time, you come to become really invested not only in the people of this place, but in some of the broader details of the world, which are so far away because you're kind of yourself in a sort of exile away from the world on this small island. And bit by bit, more and more details get filled in. The game does some really creative, interesting things with its narrative formally. You end up seeing some different perspectives and possibilities over the course of play. And then just visually and aesthetically and musically, the game takes as one of its main inspirations or one of its inspirations, I guess, the Southern Reach trilogy, which I think people are probably most familiar with by way of the Annihilation film. And so every few days there's an anomaly on this island, and you'll see a strange weather pattern, or something isn't where it's supposed to be, or something or many things are duplicated in a strange way. I think this game is just wonderful. Obviously, I think you have to know you like games where you're walking around and talking to people repeatedly in order to say you're going to like this game. I'm not going to say if what you want is the logistics of Death Stranding that you should run headfirst into this game. but I think it's really special. It's $14. It has 26 reviews on Steam. It deserves more attention for what it is. And I'm really excited to see this young developer who's only 22 or 23 continue to grow and develop their particular voice. So again, it's called Island Off Outer Darkness. You should go check this out. And if you want to hear me talk more about it, you can do so over on a recent episode of the podcast I do, Side Story. Check it out.
Okay, we're going to talk about the nuance jumping. Hello, this is Gabe Casillo. And I'm here to discuss the 2026 game Derelict Star. I just did a long hike, so it won't be as articulate as you might hope, but we're going to do our best. Derelict Star is a platformer with weird jumping. It's open-ended, it's kind of open world, you might say, and instead of being normal Mario-y jumping, there's like a weird bar on the bottom of the screen where when you run, how high you jump is based on how fast you are running.
That's true in Mario too.
Is that true?
Oh yeah, B-run.
Okay, but it's like different than that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It's more nuanced than Mario jumping.
I mean, Mario jumping's pretty nuanced too.
That's true.
It's just different. What's different about it? Is there something deeply different? Like categorically different?
It calls on you to know exactly how high the jump is going to be.
It's like maybe making it more discreet and explicit. And there are more states that you can be in.
I think there's a lot of jumps that seem impossible. And then it turns out they're not impossible, but not because you got some upgrade, because you learned something.
It's you're using your brainia.
Right.
That's what's going on. You're upgrading your brainia. Anyway, I wasn't totally sold on this game until this section we just got to, where it got way too hard. And
that's good, actually.
It turns out I actually really like when it's too hard, when it's a little bit unreasonable, and it's forcing you into actually understanding it in a deep way, not in a shallow way.
It's diabolical.
It's truly diabolical.
Right? It's in those diabolical moments that you're actually forced to use your brainia, which most games don't require.
I love it when my brainia clicks on, when I feel the brainia engage for the first time in weeks, having been lazing around dormant. You have anything else to say?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Mary, and I work at Twitch. I also stream on Twitch every Monday, so you can check me out on twitch.tv/MaryKish. The game that I think is a early access GOTY contender is Creature Kitchen. This is a half creepy, half cozy cooking sim where you cook meals for odd little creatures. Some you might be familiar with, like a bird or a raccoon, some otherworldly that will kind of scare you, but it may be in a fun way. And they're all craving some kind of food, and you have to actually cook it in your kitchen. You have to slice bread. You have to cut up tomatoes or squish them to make sauce, to make these creatures spaghetti or a sandwich or a fried egg. The mechanic that I think is really smart in this game is that they've simplified cooking. So if you were to make cereal, for example, everything goes into the oven. You would put a box of cereal and milk in the oven, and a bowl of cereal would come out of the oven. You've now constructed a meal for the animals. The idea that the designer essentially said, listen, I don't want you to actually
deal with all of the ins and outs of cooking. I want you to be creative. I want you to put 3 ingredients into the oven, and I want you to be happy that a BLT came out of it. And guess what? That octopus in the tree is craving a BLT, and you just served the perfect meal to the perfect creature. They took all the stress out of cooking, and they made it really fun and delightful and whimsical. And this is a hot contender for GOTY this year for me. Creature Kitchen. Check it out.
Hi, my name is Lily Alexander. You can find me on YouTube at Lily_LXNDR, or you can find my podcast in all the podcast places. The title is TSTV, a Twin Peaks podcast. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this. I'm like such a fan of your show. The game I'm going to talk about is Perfect Tides Station to Station, which I know you've already covered a lot, but to be honest, it's like one of 3 games I've played from this year. And as you've probably seen on my Blue Sky, I'm absolutely in love with it. Station to Station came out in January, although I first played it a couple years ago as a playtester, and I experienced it on Mac, although I think it's also coming to Switch. It is like a kind of adventure game where you spend a year as a teenager named Mara Whitefish. She's like new in the big city. She's a college student studying writing, and a lot of the mechanics have to do with like becoming a better writer. As someone who was once an 18-year-old who wanted to be a great writer, I came at this game wanting to do everything perfectly. You know, nail every assignment, handle every relationship super maturely. Very quickly, the game lets you know that's not what we're here to do. Like the first choice I remember making in this game is you're at work, but you realize that you have this assignment that you've put off that you really need to write. So already the game is dropping you in already having made a mistake. And how do you deal with this? For me, the only viable option was to tell my boss I didn't want to sort the books on the bookshelf because anarchism. At this point, I did not have any points in the anarchism stat, which, yes, there is an anarchism stat. So I was completely clueless about this. And I had to do it anyway. I'd completely embarrassed myself. And it was hilarious. I think a core idea of this game is that as a teenager, finding your way in the world, you were going to mess up. You were going to embarrass yourself. And as someone who like reflects really harshly on my younger self, it felt kind of like healing or forgiving. These embarrassing moments of teenage cringe in the game are often like comic relief, actually. And it really takes the pressure off to like do everything perfectly. These kind of like life management, time management heavy games tend to stress me out. And this one like really encouraged me to just like take it all in, enjoy your life. And I really mean this. It has helped me do that in my real life as well. So thank you, Perfect Tides Station to Station, Game of the Year.
Hey folks, Danny O'Dwyer here from NoClip and NoClip 2. NoClip, you know, we make a lot of documentaries about video games, so I'm often playing games that came out, you know, a year ago or 20 years ago. And on NoClip 2, we cover underground sort of games, like sort of hyper indie stuff. And I've definitely enjoyed and played a lot of those games. But for whatever reason, the game that has completely defined the early part of this year for me is Windrose. Windrose is a pirate-based survival craft game. There you go. That's it. I think what I like is that it has enough systems in it, and none of them are too overly complex that you can't just like figure out in a little while. It's a game that, unlike a lot of survival craft games, I think forces me to think a good bit. So I kind of want to talk about that. It's a survival craft game. So you have a character. That character goes out in the world. It kills boars. It kills dodos. I don't know why dodos are in the Caribbean. I guess dodos aren't anywhere anymore. So that's kind of a moot point. But you're going out there. You're chopping down trees. You know, you're going to mines. You're collecting resources. And with those resources, you are building new workbenches back at your base. And you are upgrading your sword and your clothes. You played a survival craft game before. You kind of know what's going on. The game has a
quest line, I guess, a golden path that it goes through. But because the world is procedurally generated, it's like a level seed that, you know, spawns your sort of set of islands and archipelago that you will spend the rest of the game on. Because of that, there is no like, you know, strategy guide online for how to do this. Like you might not know where anything is. You have to go out on your boat and, you know, sail the seas and look for land and place down fast travel bells so you can get back there without having to cross those treacherous seas again. There's a lot of strategy about fast travel in this game because you can basically bounce between any of the fast travel points. But you have to place them down. Mostly, some of the quest givers have them in sort of big port towns that you eventually have to seek out and find and uncover. And then the combat of the game I find really fun because it has a sort of a Souls-like-y block window thing going on. So there is a shield that you have, and it also, sorry, shield as in a shield sort of attribute that you have, a block attribute as it were, and so do the enemies. And by parrying effectively, you can knock that down. So it means that the combat is not just like, you know, stay far away and use your gun. Like you have to craft bullets, so they are a resource you have to be careful of. Having the right sort of sword for the right job is important. And then each of the game's different biomes that you unlock has its own sort of boss fight right at the end that sort of combines a lot of what you would have learned or should have learned in one final battle, which is good fun. And so you get into these pinch points because the world is not, you know, it's not perfectly laid out with the golden path of the quest. The way the game works in terms of difficulty is that your item level is actually the real important thing. So upgrading your equipment and your sword and your guns and all that sort of stuff is like absolutely essential if you are going to wander into areas where players or enemies are around your level, and that takes a little bit to learn. And the base building is an absolute dream. There are videos online and on Reddit of people building absolutely insane fortresses. I have a little castle area. I have a swimming pool. I have my little bedroom that's got all the different animals with their heads mounted above the door. And then it's genuinely challenging. Like the combat can be tricky. It's definitely engaging. It's not just like MMO style click and wait for the health bars to go down. Like you have to fight properly. Taking on mobs is tricky. And sometimes you get stuck and you have to figure out for yourself, why am I not beating these enemies? What is so tricky about this new biome? You know, like how am I supposed to deal with this new enemy type that's turned up? And you might die over and over and over again. And it forces you to not just simply grind until you have enough stuff that you can beat the area. It forces you to think. And I think that's really cool and something I've definitely seen missing in a lot of these survival craft games. So yeah, Windrose. It's out now in early access. And yeah, it's a good time.
Hi, it's Maddie Myers from the podcast Triple Click. Nintendo doesn't need my help selling the Switch 2, but I'm about to do that because my favorite game of 2026 is the system seller. It's Pokopia. So this game is more of a long-term project than it is a game. It's in this post-apocalyptic world. There are no humans. You're playing as a Ditto, and you can mold your body as Dittos are wont to do to be shaped like a human, in part so that you can use the old machinery of humanity. The world is covered in trash and the leavings of humans who used to live there, and it's haunting and it's sad. But it's also uplifting because you're cleaning up this world and you're making it hospitable for you and for other Pokemon who are your friends. And I think this is the only Pokemon game I've ever played where you can't tell a joke about how it's basically dogfighting or cockfighting or whatever, because the world of Pokemon is dark and it's fun to joke about it. And that's fine. It's a children's game. It doesn't need to seriously consider the question of Pokemon personhood, and that's why adults tell jokes about it. That's as it should be. But Pokopia actually comes pretty close to addressing this question because Pokemon have personhood in this game, and they're the masters of their own destiny. You're playing as a Pokemon, you're part of a social community of Pokemon that works communally to support one another, and it's obviously the opposite of the world they once lived in. It's a world created by Pokemon who were once underfoot and like serving their human masters, you know? So you're not grinding to go into battle. You're doing tasks that are pretty grindy, but they're things like planting seeds and harvesting food and sweeping all this sand off of old houses, human houses, so that you can make them livable, but not for humans, for Pokemon. And these are classic cozy game activities, and they're very effective here. I think the reason why I keep gravitating back to this game in between other games I'm playing is personal. So I'm going to get personal. I started a small business this year. It's my website, mothership.blog. It's been really empowering to do that, but it's also, it feels like starting over. And it's starting over in an environment that is hostile to journalism and criticism. And that's in the small sense of it. It's also a world that's hostile to marginalized people like me and the people that I want to publish and that I do publish at Mothership. And when I play games, sometimes I want to escape, but sometimes I want to see the world reflected. And Pokopia actually manages to do both of those things by reflecting some of the larger concepts of our world in its world, but also presenting this fantasy of a community. So I think that's why I'm gravitating towards this world so much and towards this Ditto, because it's pure and it's unselfish and it's this vision of what our world could look like, which is to say it's a world without humans, or more specifically, it's a world without what humans represented in the world of Pokemon. It's a utopia. A Pokopia. Something nice to believe in.
Hi everyone, I'm super psyched to be here. I'm Ki-hoon, a freelance writer, journalist, whatever. I'm predominantly writing for the tabletop RPG website, Rascal News, while juggling writing for whichever sites will take my writing these days. And at the same time working on a book on mouthwashing for Lost in Cult. Anyway, I'm pretty sure everyone is going to want to talk about Titanium cards, so I'm here to give some love to Moves of the Diamond Hand, a bizarre little game that I played on PC. So, Moves of the Diamond Hand is an RPG, and you're here to join a very prestigious circus in a strange-looking city. Its denizens have semi-realistic faces imposed on their heads, and you'll walk among animal-human hybrids. But one thing I like is the dice system that underpins the game. I've recently learned that Diamond Hand's dice rolling mechanic is inspired by the tabletop RPG system Fate, which makes me believe that there is so much more that video games can pick up and learn from its tabletop siblings. Basically, interactions in the game involve rolling a bunch of 6-sided dice. To succeed, you would just need to get a higher score than your opponent, but these dice aren't your conventional dice. Instead, the numbers on the dice can be increased by investing experience points on them. I adore this system. It truly is a different take on typical RPG systems, but at the end of the day, I believe systems are nothing without really solid writing to bolster them. Fortunately, Diamond Hand is full of absurd, charming scenarios. It's an incredibly solid game, and I believe everyone really should be paying more attention to its developer, Cosmody.
Hey, my name is Peter Hunt Spitek. I'm a YouTuber and podcaster. You might be familiar with my YouTube channel, Peter Spitek, which is a channel devoted to making video essays that connect the dots between gaming and our culture at large. Or you might know me from my podcast, Critical Error, a show that talks about the way we talk about games, criticism, and gaming culture. The game I'd like to talk about today is Marathon, which I played on PS5. Marathon is Sony's big extraction shooter made by Bungie, and what I find most interesting about it is the way that its status as a live service game has the potential to change the dynamic between players. I made a video on YouTube about the way that the fictional corporations in Marathon lie to you about other players, pushing you to be more aggressive toward them in a way that, when you stop and think about it, doesn't really make much sense. The game is the prisoner's dilemma, but it wants you to choose violence at every turn and forget that cooperation can yield much better results. What makes that dilemma more interesting, however, is the fact that over time, Bungie has added in items to change that dynamic. Since I made my video, Marathon now has something called Mercy Kits, which allows you to revive fallen enemies, but given the culture of Marathon's community and how it leans towards unrelenting violence between players, giving everyone an item that allows you to pick up someone who's already been taken down is a recipe for, if you can believe it, even more violence. The tension of the prisoner's dilemma that Marathon presents gets ratcheted up significantly if you're being healed by your enemies, since it's very likely that they're just toying with you and want to watch you squirm one last time. Or maybe they actually do want to help you, and now we're back to that original prisoner's dilemma. This sort of community dynamic really lends itself towards live service games, since Bungie is able to add new features that augment the existing culture. Of course, Mercy Kits are largely used to torture people while they're already down, but who knows? Maybe different upcoming items change the culture of the game in new ways. I know everyone is so tired of live service experiences, and I totally get it, but Bungie is doing something really compelling with the format by presenting new twists and turns to established dynamics with the addition of new mechanics doled out with every update. Thanks for having me. Marathon is cool. Talk soon.
I love to make this show for you. In fact, I might like it too much because sometimes the clock hits 6 p.m. and I'm like, what am I doing for dinner? I need to take care of my family. I need something delicious and healthy, and I haven't even gotten things started. For me, eating healthy, it's not a willpower problem, it's a setup problem. At least it was until I found Factor. Factor has made it so much easier to make sure that I and my family are eating well with its fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs that are delivered right to your and my front door. With Factor, I am hitting my nutrition goals this season without the planning, without the grocery runs, without the cooking. And I am eating well. Most recently, I have had the fajita spiced shrimp and filet mignon, the pepper fondue shredded chicken, just some delicious stuff. Factor has meals built around your goals, whether that is weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, or GLP-1 support. For strength and workout recovery, check out Factor's Muscle Pro collection. Factor's food is fresh, never frozen, over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian, so there's always something new to look forward to. It's ready in 2 minutes. Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers straight to your door, so you have more time for everything you love this spring, and I have more time to make you this show, and also to spend time with my family, which I love y'all, but I love them the most. I enjoy Factor, I enjoy that it tastes good, and I think that you will too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames50 off and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscription only while supplies last until September 27th, 2026.
Hello, Post Games. My name is Oliver Nelson Jr. I've worked on over 110 games in my career, but most people know me for being the studio head over at Strange Scaffold. We put out Space Warlord Baby Training Simulator earlier this year. We've made games like I Am Your Beast and El Paso Elsewhere. And we just announced our latest title coming out this year as well. Truck Coon is supporting me from Another World, a chaotic anime-inspired driving game where you must hit people at high speed to transport them to the first person you hit at high speed with your car and support her in Another World. She kills them for XP. It's very fun and in good taste, I promise. People seem to really dig that one, and I encourage you to wishlist it on Steam if you get a chance. My favorite game of 2026 is It Has My Face, because it is one of very, very few games I've played in my career that has inspired a burning rage that I didn't make it first. It's available on Steam. It just came out of early access. It's developed by Nightbite Games and published by Behavior Interactive. And originally, it wasn't published by Behavior Interactive. For a very rare move in video games, it was originally an early access title. It was doing its thing. I don't know how successfully, but it was trucking along. It was a game that was on my wish list, and Behavior Interactive picked it up and during its early access period supported it. So now it has a publisher, despite having already come out in some form. So it emerged out of early access with this behavior interactive nod. And the reason I love this game is just its desperate stylish efficiency, building an entire game off of a very simple core. It Has My Face is composed of a series of 3D levels, very low poly, very minimal. And you are a tiny 2D billboarding pixelated character. And every level begins with the prompt that it has your face. You look through a jagged mirror at your own face. You memorize the traits of your character as best you can, and you're now sprinting through the level to find this evil clone who has your face and will take you out if you don't get it first. It is a run-based game, but in a way I've never seen before. It really earnestly engages with that, what that means for a game loop, and with a narrative cycle. So it's not a traditional roguelike or run-based game. It's more like a linear game that has randomized elements that you're engaging with intentionally across its runtime as they stack in exponential ways the further you get in. And that's on a play-by-play basis, not you waiting to get good enough or understand the systems well enough that you can eventually get to the third tier or something. At least for the part of the game I've played, you are hunting this character who is hunting you. It layers on a story. It layers on things you can take into the levels and growing, upgrading progression, as well as the surprising twists and deviations on what you are and how you relate to the wider mystery of this world. And it is so dang efficient and really, really fun and really compulsive. I turned it on, expecting to give it like 15 minutes, excited to hop in for its celebration of the end of early access, and I ended up putting in 2 solid hours of just another session of It Has My Face, each time revealing and unveiling a wider, brilliant world. How dare you make a game so stylish, so efficient, so explicitly budget friendly, while also producing an outsized impact on a player. Congratulations, Nightbite. And also, how dare you? How dare you? I could never make It Has My Face because you already made it. But now I get to play It Has My Face because you already made it. So some good things happen in this world. Please play It Has My Face.
Hi, Chris. This is Jacob Geller, video essayist on YouTube and author of the book How a Game Lives. And my favorite game of the year thus far is Slay the Spire 2, which I was worried would feel almost like a default choice because I have played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of Slay the Spire 1, and what I expected was a sequel that was simply improved and nicer looking, which Slay the Spire 2 certainly is. But what has struck me so much, even while the game is just in early access, which it is right now, is how much more playful and exciting this game is than the first game. For those completely in the dark, Slay the Spire 2 is, like its predecessor, a roguelike deck building game. It is, in my mind at least, kind of the archetype from which all other roguelike deck builders have been made, at least since the first one. But what makes 2 so exciting is the number of ways that they have given you to just send your run off the rails in these amazingly unique and powerful feeling ways, while maintaining this incredibly important balance that the entire game is built around. In Slay the Spire 1, you would often throughout your run make decisions that were basically gaining something by giving up something else. You would beat a boss, and then you would get a gift that was like 1 more energy to play cards, but now you can't gain gold, or 1 more energy to play cards, but now you can't gain potions. And it was all, that it's a nice upgrade sometimes, but it was never something that would like truly thrill you and send your mind spinning at the possibilities. But in Slay the Spire 2, the abilities that you're being given are like when you go to a shop, buy every single item in the shop automatically. Or here is a new card that is only designed for your character that is like an exponentially more powerful version of a card that you started with. Or you can forego card rewards and get relics instead. And it's what they have done with the game is so amazing because playing it still feels like this very careful game of chess where everything you do both in rounds and between rounds affects how the rest of the game is going to go. But the choices that you're making are so much more dynamic and lead to much more exciting and branching paths in a way that I really didn't think was possible, given that they maintained many of the characters from Slay the Spire 1. I am currently sending you this as a voice note from Italy, and I thought as a treat for myself on a vacation that I'm on, I would not bring any video game related material and I could just kind of chill out and read my books and whatever. And instead I have been tortured by the fact that I can't play Slay the Spire 2, which is all I want to do and all I think about. So that is my current favorite game of 2026, and I look forward to it being my favorite game of 2027 as well.
Hello, I am Ashley Bardhan. I am a senior writer at Games Radar Plus, and I run the experimental video game blog Plant or Beast. My absolute favorite game of 2026 so far has to be the Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly remake, which is maybe cheating, but it's the truth. It's my truth. I played it on PC. It's special to me for what I thought going into it would be an inconsequential detail, which is you can hold your sister's hand. This was a game mechanic developers wanted to include in the original Fatal Frame 2 in 2003. Series director Makoto Shibata said last year that the original Fatal Frame 2 devs gave up on that mechanic for quote-unquote a number of reasons. But I'm so happy that they revisited it for this remake. It's so real. It makes everything feel so real to me. Protagonist Mio spends a lot of time lost and shaking in the cursed Minakami village where the game is set as her twin Mayu evades her and becomes increasingly possessed by a vengeful spirit. The first time I held her hand felt like, I don't know, giving my real sister a hug when I'm scared. So in that same way, the few moments where you can grab onto Mayu's hand and replenish your health, which is the connected game mechanic, it just feels special because it's like you're pulling her soul physically back to you. You're only ever armed with an enchanted camera in the Fatal Frame game, so holding hands also helps calm my nerves, like I mentioned, when I'm feeling extra vulnerable. It's like avoiding feeling vulnerable in one way, hiding from the ghosts by holding your sister's hand in exchange for another kind of vulnerability, admitting that you need your sister who's growing increasingly distant from you. And as a sister myself, I love narratives that explore this dynamic between girls who, by birth, are meant to be close, but because they're girls, are sometimes in competition instead. Some of my favorite horror movies, like Ginger Snaps and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, do this as well, and I love them for it.
Hi, Chris Plant. It's Teddy Deef, co-designer of Hyperlight Drifter, director and lead singer of We Are OFK, the game, and OFK, the virtual band. The game that I've been really excited about in 2026, despite the fact that I mostly play action games these days, is a game called On Together. It's available on Steam for PC and Mac, and it's a virtual co-working game. So what you do is you make an avatar, you get on a server with some friends, you roam around, you play some mini games, kinda. It's kind of like Animal Crossing, but without all the economy and the grind. Because mostly what you do is you make your avatar, you slowly unlock stuff for it, and you just do whatever you were going to do in the real world, whether that be working on your computer, or eating a meal, or exercising. So you log in with your character and you play an animation that shows your character like working at a desk, or drawing, or reading a book, or eating or exercising, whatever represents what you're actually doing in real life. And you do it virtually next to your friends. And it's a really low friction pleasant way to hang out with your friends, and makes it really easy to quickly customize a character that feels like you. So it's kind of like post-Animal Crossing, post-COVID lockdown, a way to hang out with your friends that's much lower friction than Animal Crossing, which just takes so long to log in, and you have to do all this Tom Nook, deep capitalism stuff. This is just less. And you can even make the game less and minimize it into a tiny little visualization of you and your friends doing whatever you're doing in the corner of your computer screen while you use the rest of the screen for whatever you were going to be doing anyway. So it's like barely a game, and I'm using air quotes there, but it highlights the divide to me between what a game is, whatever your definition is, and what a video game can be. That outside the bounds of like, oh, it's a game, so it has to have rules or competition or challenge, a video game can just be a virtual experience that's interactive, that's a little bit looser. And in an era of co-op slop, or whatever you want to call those games, where what I've seen as a game developer is a lot of new developers discovering that networking tools have gotten much better. It's a lot easier and faster to make a multiplayer game as long as you're not making one that's high stakes or competitive. You can make a prototype of an online co-op game in like a day, and I've done it recently and been very surprised at how fast it is. And so you have all these developers trying to figure out, well, what do I do with these tools? What does an indie dev do if they're making a weird online game? And so people are doing a lot of physics fun and tumbling around, but I like On Together, and I find it very interesting because it's doing less. And although it was surely an undertaking to make and is wonderful, it's a really beautiful example of what people are trying to figure out now in video games, now that, quote unquote, anybody can make a networked online game. So check it out. Love the podcast. Thanks for having me on. Bye.
Hi, I'm Jeff from the YouTube channel Mother's Basement, where normally I talk about anime, but I actually do have a degree in video game design, a diploma technically from Vancouver Film School, so I know from whence I speak on this. And Chris reached out to me asking what my favorite game of 2026 is. If you'd asked me like a month ago, I probably would have said Mugenics, but I'm just obsessed with Pokemon Champions right now. I've been watching Pokemon VGC content for a really long time. Wolf Glick, a little bit of Cybertron, a few other channels. And I've wanted to get into it because it seems like such a fun game that's adjacent to deck builders, but without the, randomness of Marble Snap or Hearthstone or whatever. But it's just such a huge pain in the ass to actually set up a competitive Pokemon team. You're talking like dozens to even hundreds of hours of work just in a single player RPG to just make that happen. So being able to create a competitive team from scratch with, pulls from the Gacha Ranch in the game, and also you can set it up with your Pokemon from Pokemon Go or any other Pokemon game that you've been playing, is just super cool. But I think the coolest thing about it is how the design team limited the available Pokemon and the available items to create a very reasonable learning environment for a new player to VGC. It's been hugely successful in that regard. We're talking like dwarfing previous tournament records by orders of magnitude with the most recent events in the game. But it's just made a very manageable on-ramp for figuring out how competitive Pokemon works and like calculating the competitive Pokemon metagame without actually having to keep literally 1,000 Pokemon in mind. It's a very nice setup. It's a lower power format with lots of viable options. Like a tournament was just won by an Ariados, which is crazy if you know anything about competitive Pokemon history. They've really made it super accessible without dumbing it down to the point of not being fun. It's a 9 out of 10 just because it's got some glitches and stuff, but it's a super amazing 9 out of 10 and definitely going to be my favorite online game for the foreseeable future.
My name is Caitlin Tremblay, and I am the narrative director at Softbrains. I've worked on games like Ambrosia Sky, Grindstone, Watch Dogs Legion, and A Mortician's Tale. And my favorite game of 2026 so far is Perfect Tide Station to Station, which I played on Steam. Station to Station is an incredibly well-written and poignant coming-of-age story that perfectly captured the spirit of just how messy finding yourself can be. It's also so deeply relatable to me specifically, who also understands what it's like when dating a man who is inappropriately older than you is only the start of the many bad decisions you can make in the pursuit of a creative writing degree in the early aughts. And that's what I love most about it. It's not just how deeply relatable it is, although all of the couch surfing, bad parties, bad drugs, good music, and pursuit of your own creative voice is deeply relatable to me. Is that Mara is a messy protagonist who does in fact make bad decisions, but who is compelling throughout all of it. Even when you, as the player, try to guide her towards more healthy choices, she's a protagonist with an opinion, and she bucks against that. She's young, she's learning who she is, how she loves, and what sort of voice she has as a writer, and to do that she has to make mistakes. You can only find yourself by trying things, and trying will involve both succeeding and failing. And of course the major system in the game is really smart in how it reflects this. Mara is a writing student, and so having to write assignments and short stories is a really neat mechanic to connect Mara's personal life to how she's growing herself as a writer. What you choose to do, what you choose to read, informs Mara's perspectives, which then unlocks different topics that she can write about and how well she can write about them. So for example, digging really into music, reading books on the topic, and asking people about it unlocks new layers of meaning behind music for Mara, which you as the player can then bring into the various writing assignments you have to complete throughout the course of the game. It's such a clever system for showing exactly how what we consume, who we talk to, and what we do informs the ways in which we approach our writing and build our voice. Learning to be a writer isn't just reading. It's listening to music. It's the conversations we have with people. It's learning what we care about and why. And sometimes some things you just can't learn from. No matter how many drugs you do, sometimes there just isn't meaning at the bottom of it. And that's okay. That's part of the process. So playing it, yes, I did feel extremely seen. And it was a beautiful way to connect with a former version of myself that I can sometimes be really hard on. Station to Station is raw. The emotions behind it, the gameplay, it all feels like an extremely confident and earnest exploration of growing into yourself. It captured a moment in time that's so specific. Being a writing student in the early aughts in a North American city, that felt like it was really such a love letter to both a time period and to the versions of ourselves we used to be. I wouldn't be who I am right now if I didn't make the mistakes I did as an undergrad, mistakes that were shockingly similar to a lot of the same mistakes Mara does in the game. And even if it didn't feel so relatable, it's still so honest in its depictions that I would have loved it either way. It's so truthful of a moment, but it's also so truthful of the larger experience of finding your voice as an artist, and that's why I loved it so much.
Hello, this is Brendan Bigley from the internet, and it's an honor to be nominated to remind people about the existence of Vampire Crawlers, the wild card from Vampire Survivors, which I still can't believe is the real full name of the video game. At its core, this thing is a roguelike dungeon crawler mixed with a deck builder where all of the cards and enemies are pulled right from Vampire Survivors. It's unbelievable. This is truly the kind of pitch that should have kicked off like a medium-sized religion. We should be erecting monuments in areas with high foot traffic for this video game. And my favorite thing about it, honestly, is that I'm done with it. I played the entire thing. It's not often these days that a roguelike drops that has a discrete endpoint, but like 20 to 24 hours in, I had unlocked every single thing in Vampire Crawlers, and then I got to put it down. Some people will probably see that as a negative, and some people, with the light of truth in their hearts, will see that as a positive. What kind of person are you going to be, dear listener?
Hi, I'm Eka, creative director of Outer Loop Games. We recently released a game called Dos Divas. It's a turn-based combat RPG about cooking. It's out on all platforms. A game that left an impression on me earlier this year is called Creature Kitchen. The Steam page description is creepy, cozy cooking simulator where you befriend local wildlife and feed them their favorite snacks. With a strange house to search and forest to explore, the witching hour has only begun. The game starts with you walking to a cabin at night that you're house sitting for a friend. You walk into the kitchen and there are some notes, a camera, a photo album that fills out as you take photos with notes. And then inside and around the house and the yards are different types of creatures.
starting with, modern day creatures you'd expect, like raccoons and things, and then not so ones you expect later. Also, when you walk into the kitchen, you notice some of the cabinets and the fridge are padlocked. There's a pantry you can walk into, and if you keep walking, it's just like a giant corridor that is endless, and the only way you get out of it is turn back around and go back to the kitchen. Essentially, you need to figure out what to feed to what critter in the yard, and also to find recipes and ingredients. The vibes are great with Creature Kitchen. It's both cozy, creepy, and weird, and inviting all at the same time, thanks to its pacing, the low-poly early 2000s inspired 3D art, and the charming music. When you're making a game, there are 1,000 different directions you can go in terms of how much production value you put into a certain mechanics and interaction and environment, the characters, a feature, and how much detail to add to render that item, like food in this case. As you find recipes and fill out the cookbook, you take those ingredients, either chop them up, put it in a mixer, cook it in a pan, and then drop it all into this magical oven that cooks it and makes a food. The oven shakes, makes a sound, and pops out a food. The food is represented in a brown paper lunch bag with a picture of the food you cooked. That's a really smart way to not have to spend time rendering out each of the food items in 3D. It also makes it easy to carry for the player and leave it near the critter that you're trying to feed. I don't know the dev team, but judging by their choices, they're a smart group that was focused on shipping a tight experience. It's a game that will stick with you after you're done playing. Check it out on Steam. I think it's $7.99 USD. Worth your time.
Hello, I'm Mike Drucker, and I want to tell you about Sektori. That's Sektori. It just came out, but it's somehow now my favorite game of 2026. If you've played Geometry Wars, you ever played Geometry Wars? You ever played Robotron 2084 or Smash TV? It is a twin-stick shooter that is so simple, and it works so well. It kind of feels like if you were in an alternate dimension and arcades were still a big thing. It's really hard to describe why it's good because of the simplicity of it. You play a little geometric triangle-shaped ship that's not too different from the asteroid ship back in the day, and you're firing at other geometric figures. Now, the thing that makes it great is the upgrade system. I wouldn't quite call it a roguelike, because you're not like ongoingly updating your ship per se. It's a little more like you get upgrades every run and then you can unlock more upgrades. So I guess that is roguelike. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that every run only lasts about like 7 to 15 minutes if you're lucky. And it takes a lot of skill, but it's also the type of game where you only have 10 minutes, you can play it. You have an hour, you will lose an hour to it. But Sektori is just, you know what it is? It's just that it's fun. It is a fun game. That's it. It's not trying to like pull your heartstrings manipulatively. It's not trying to change the game on extraction shooters. It is just a video game. If there was a cop show in 1996, this is what they would probably make as a fake game to put on the screen. I cannot explain this game very well because it is so simple and it's so good. And there's just so many little moments when you're just trying to get past one more boss and you die in this bullet hell storm. It is one of the purest, just most fun games I've played in a very long time. So that is my current game of the year. Sektori. Sektori. I do not make any money from this sale. All I know is that this is a good game, and I would like you to play it because I think other people would enjoy it, and I want more video games that are just outright fun, that are simple, good old-time fun. I also want complicated ones. Don't get mad at me. Nobody yell at me, okay? Nobody yell at me online. So one more time, this is Mike Drucker, and if you want to get my book, it's called Good Game, No Rematch, A Life Made of Video Games, available everywhere now. Thank you very much.
Hi, Chris. It's Geeta. This is Geeta Jackson from Aftermath.site. I'm the co-founder of Aftermath.site and the author of the upcoming romance novel, Level Up for Romance, which is a fun thing to say. So I was not sure how to answer this question until literally yesterday. And I think it has a lot to do with the news about the other game from this studio, But the more I think about it, the more it just feels right for me to say my game of the year so far is Marathon, the new Marathon extraction shooter. And it's very unlikely for me for this to be something I hold in such high esteem. But I was playing it yesterday for a couple hours with friends, and I am so rarely so enticed by a first-person shooter. It's not my first pick of a game. I already have like a cooperative game that I play with friends. I also play a ton of Night Rain with some of my friends. Now that the highs of Destiny 2 have been behind us for quite some time, I think it's really clear why Halo was synonymous with the word video games for so long. You can see it in Destiny and now in Marathon as well. The guns all feel unique and also like feel very physical. They feel like physical objects in your hands. It's hard to describe once you compare the precision of the shooting to sort of the mushiness and imprecision of other shooters. But it is kind of hypnotic to play them. Another thing, though, is just I really love the weirdness and sort of open ends of the lore of games of Destiny and Marathon now, especially. Marathon really does tell a very lived feeling series about what it's like to live and work under the conditions of late capitalism, where you basically don't have any rights as a worker at all. And your labor, your personhood is seen by corporations as being completely disposable. I always joke with my friend that the voice of the AI from New Caloric, which is a McDonald's-esque futuristic company, is just giving a regular white guy CEO, right? He is trying to project that white guy CEO nature of guy you can just have a beer with. There is so much richness in this surrounding narrative stuff that you see in and out of the map design and in the story. And then just on top of that, it's like, I love the thing that video games can offer, which most real-life scenarios don't offer, which is the ability to solve a puzzle in a group with your friends. And as you progress through all the Marathon maps, the more complicated things become for you. When you go from Perimeter to Dire Marsh, suddenly you have to worry about environmental bullshit and poison and the sort of grind fest of PvP in that map. And then you go from Dire Marsh to Outpost, and Outpost is a whole different ballgame. There's so much information in the sound design in Outpost telling you who is where, showing you can pick a fight if you want to, or encouraging you from running away from points of interest really quickly if you don't want to. And what I've been working myself up to is trying to hit level 25 before the end of the season so I can see Cryo Archive, which is just high-end raid content like they used to have from Destiny 2. I completed all of the vaulted Destiny raids because it was 2020 and there wasn't a lot else for me to do. It was sad to lose those raids because I don't get that kind of thing from basically any other game. And Marathon gives it back to me. I don't know what's going to happen with Bungie. I don't know what's going to happen with Destiny as a franchise. I really don't know if Marathon's going to last. But it's a really fucking good game, and I really like it.
Welcome to the halfway point and the Patreon bonus. If you listen to the show, you know how this works. Here is where we split. For people who are not subscribers, don't worry. There's still so much more show for you. We have a ton more guests sharing their EGOTYs. But if you are a subscriber, if you go to patreon.com/postgames, you pay $5 and you support the show and keep it alive, you get to hear my 10 games of the year so far. And some real good stuff, you know? I'm not gonna brag, but I got some good taste, and hopefully that is partly why you are here. So, let's take a beat, let's split.
Hi, I'm Jeff Grubb from Giant Bomb. I want to talk to you about Scamline, which I played on PC. Scamline is a multiplayer social deduction game, friend slop of a sort. It is a game where up to 8 players all get put into their own rooms, and the only primary way to talk to the other players is by calling them on a phone. We played this over on Giant Bomb, and it was incredible to like see how instantly everyone just got what was going on and what you're supposed to do to take advantage of the other players. Before we got started, I was asking the other players, are you familiar with the prisoner's dilemma, with game theory? And some were, but most actually surprisingly weren't. And yet it was astonishing to see just how quickly, in a scenario that is set up just like the prisoner's dilemma, everyone understood the assignment of lying, promising the world to the other player, and then doing the thing that was best for themselves. The best moment, though, was talking to my friend Jan as he is planning basically my demise. He was telling me that our other friend was coming at me with a gun. It turned out the entire time Jan had been talking to him and saying, hey, I'm going to make it so that you get the gun, and when you get it, you should go kill Jeff Grubb in his room. It was a terrifying moment. It was even more terrifying to go back and watch the stream afterward and see how Jan engineered that entire thing.
Hi, post-game listeners. This is Nicole Carpenter. I am a reporter who covers the video game industry. My favorite game so far this year is Perfect Tide Station to Station. This is a follow-up to Perfect Tides, which is about a teenager named Mara who is, living her life, going to high school. Perfect Tide Station to Station is Mara heading to college. What I love so much about both games is that the writing is so devastatingly honest. It is so intimate, it is so personal, and yet it feels like something I can connect so deeply to. But I want to talk about one moment in Station to Station that is really, really special. It is one where Mara is breaking up with her boyfriend, and I think it's a really good example of how Meredith Gran and 3Bs uses the experience in comics to create something that is very interesting mechanically. I talked to Meredith Gran several months ago when Station to Station came out, and she was saying that she, as a comics artist, likes to play with rhythm and space. And in comics, that is basically using panels, blank panels, panel sizes, maybe even a blank page, no panels at all, using that format for storytelling. And so maybe it's like a blank panel. Maybe it's like very, very fast moving panels, small, quick action, and that can really convey a feeling. And she does this in Station to Station throughout. But in the scene where Mara is breaking up with a boyfriend over the phone, he's a long-distance boyfriend, it has such an intense rhythm. You're talking to the boyfriend, you are choosing the responses to him. It comes in at a frantic pace. It's kind of like a boss battle. Mara has health bars, she has hearts, and so depending on what you choose, her health goes down. It can also go up. You can actually fail. You can fail to break up with the boyfriend, but there's one part of this, once you have broken up with him, that everything just goes silent. It goes silent for such a long time that I thought my game was frozen. And then suddenly the music starts again. It gets fired up, and it's so effective in creating that. Those are my dogs. It's so effective at really playing out that intense emotion mechanically. It's really worth checking out. She does this sort of thing throughout the game, really, really deeply using these mechanics to enhance the storytelling. It's really special. It's a very special game, and you should play it.
Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Range Touch. You might know me from things like Shelved by Genre, or Just King Things, or one of the many critical pieces I've written about games over the years. I'm here to tell you about my favorite game of 2026 so far. The name of the game that I'm going to be talking about right now is Amber Spire. It's a game that I've been playing on PC a little bit. It's released by Lunar Division and published by Bethel Games, and it's a game where one of the major creative forces behind it is Nick Tringali, a game designer I respect and am a personal fan of, and I've played, I think, all of Nick's games so far. What I really like about Amber Spire is that it's a game about making a city on another planet. And you might think, oh, that's like Civilization. Oh, that's like Alpha Centauri. Oh, that's like some other game I can't think of right now. Mars Colony Simulator, something like that. It's not like that. It's a game that asks you to put together all of these kind of post-apocalyptic science fiction fantasy buildings, and you build them around each other, in relationship to each other, near each other, and then using that arrangement, you pull resources from some of them, and you put resources in the other ones in order to hit particular kinds of goals. And that might mean increasing your population. That might mean increasing the types of things you're bringing in from off-world. And the purpose behind that is that you want to be able to take the space and orient it, change it, transform it, but you're doing it linearly. So you don't have the opportunity to kind of mix and match and move things around to do all that kind of stuff. Really what you're trying to do is you're trying to roll dice, you're trying to arrange buildings, and you're trying to see if you can make that all work together. And there's also things like the weather, there's things like environmental hazards that are pushing on you. A lot of people have talked about it in terms of being like a Euro-style board game. I think of it a lot more as feeling like poetry almost. The system pushes on you and asks you to do certain things. And I gotta be honest, I've put my couple hours into the game, and I've thought it was really special across those couple hours, but I've thought about it for way more than that. And the reason is that once you put a building down, once you make a building do a particular kind of thing, once you start pulling certain resources, you're kind of locked into this loop. And the loop pushes on you to change new things and to move new things into new positions and to build out from there. So you end up with these kind of sectors of the city that progressively move out from that position. It's not quite the same vibe as something like Dwarf Romantic, if you've played that game, but it's closer to that than I would say it is like any other city builder. And of course, what happens over the course of the game is you start interacting with these kind of interstellar families and cohorts and clans, and they start asking you to do particular things. So now you got to take things off-world, new resources off-world, you got to ship them out. You want to try to create alliances with certain ones, and that constrains your actions. Amber Spire is a really great case of a designer taking a series of parameters and using them to push on the play experience, not to create a system in which you feel really good about winning. I mean, I'm sure that one wins Amber Spire. I'm sure it's a completable game in that way, but that hasn't been how I've played it. I've just kind of restarted the game several times and interacted with it, and it has the same kind of poetry to it, or the same kind of impression to it that I have with a game like Caves of Cud, or a game like, weirdly enough, The First Control, where just interacting with it and thinking about what the game produces for me is just as fun as whatever kind of output it's asking for. Now, look, if you're not into that kind of thing, if you are into a game with very clear goals and some outputs, I guess you can play it that way. It certainly is very clear with you about what you want to do. That's not the thing that I'm into. And if you're into kind of a weird little city building game that plays by some slightly different rules than most city building games, I think you should check out Amber Spire. It's really neat. The thing that I'm interested in, the thing that I like the most, Amber Spire.
Hello, my name is Chris Donlan and I'm a writer. My favourite game of 2026 so far is called Frogwell. I think it's actually called Frogwell Remastered, and it's on Corgi Space, the Pico 8 collection from Finji. A bunch of tiny little, really brilliant games that often feel like sketches of games. Pico 8 has a way of feeling like sort of jottings in a notebook for game designers. And even though the collection came out last year, Frogwell was added this year. And it's this beautiful game about a frog that has fallen down a well, as the name suggests, I suppose. There's two things I really love about it. One of them is it's a flip screen game, which means each I think that's the right term. It means each screen is a different part of the map. So you start off and then you go down this well, and then you end up in the next screen, which is the bit below it. And I really particularly love this in games. Partly it reminds me of Jet Set Willy when I was young, where the whole house, each room was a screen. And the other reason, I just think it's a really evocative way of doing a large place in the game, where you feel that you're moving back and forwards between these places, these screens, which are always there even when you're not there. When you leave one, it remains sort of in your imagination. You know how things connect. The other thing I really like about Frogwell is basically a puzzle platformer. So you have to get through each level by overcoming obstacles. And a lot of the ways you do this is you have two moves at any one point. One of them is a hop, which moves you one block along or either up or down, depending on if there's like a one block difference on either side. And the other move is like where your tongue zaps out, and it's basically a teleport in a straight line. So it sort of zaps you to a distant wall and then you drop down. And what I think is so brilliant about this is that this is quite a complex game with quite complex challenges, even though sort of the puzzles are fairly simple. They make all the bits and pieces come together to create quite a head scratcher. What I like about it is at any point you have a this or that. You're like, am I going to take one block to the left or right, or am I going to teleport to the closest wall? And there's something about channeling all that complexity through this or that decisions that really gets to me as a 47-year-old who can't really think straight anymore and perhaps never could. I like having everything channeled through this or that, left or right. What are you going to do, A or B? And the game just creates beautiful stuff out of it. You've asked me to hype something that I've got coming out. I have a book on the way, but I can't talk about it. But yeah, that's it. Well, lots of love to you and all the best. Bye.
Howdy. I'm Wallace Truesdale. I run the site exoclaw.com, but you may have also seen me around Unwinnable, Stop Caring, AV Club Games, and a few more places here and there around the game crit space. When it comes to the games that have come out in 2026 so far, if I'm being honest with myself, the one that won't leave my heart alone is Love Eternal. This is definitely a heart over the mind choice because, frankly, I'm not sure suggesting this game to most people is a good idea. So Love Eternal, which I played on PC, is a pretty sadistic 2D platformer that takes cues from Celeste and VVV, while also having a psychological horror narrative that takes some pretty big creative swings, both in content and structure. Some of the swings pay off really, really well. Others are kind of a mess. Plus, because of how difficult this game is, I can imagine a lot of people never seeing some of those creative swings, especially some of the best ones, because they will have bounced off ahead of time because, again, this game is hard. I really tried my best to emphasize this, so if you check this out after hearing me talk about it, you only have yourself to blame for whatever frustration you deal with. This game is a bit all over the place, but I really, really like it. The reasons for why have changed over time. At first is because there's a certain shift that takes place in the game that I think, while a narrative around it ultimately falls apart, is still one of the most interesting things I've seen in the game all year, while arguably actually fitting the themes of the game itself really well. But nowadays, I think the reason why I like it so much is similar to Bungie's Marathon. This is the kind of game that is unabashedly for a certain kind of person and does everything in its power to not waste the time of those who it isn't for. To use an analogy, it's about as appealing and palatable as the menu item that's spicy enough to warrant a waiver before eating. So if you're the kind of person to at least think about ordering that item or do something similar that makes people ask if you're okay, check out Love Eternal.
Hi, I am Rebecca Valentine. I am a staff writer at Kotaku, and I'm here to tell you about a little game called Titanium Court that I've really been enjoying so far this year. Titanium Court is very weird and difficult to describe. I've been telling people it's a little bit like if Fire Emblem Three Houses strategy portion was a match 3 setting up for a tower defense game, and then if the Academy portion was like if the casts of Pippin and A Midsummer Night's Dream got loose in a castle that was also kind of House of Leaves-ish. Yeah, anyway, that doesn't matter. It's a very cool little strategy narrative driven PC game, whatever. Anyway, the thing that I love about Titanium Court is very difficult to talk about because it is kind of spoilery. So I'm going to just be very light in my touch here. But about halfway through Titanium Court, you are asked by the game to start questioning why you are really playing it and what you actually get out of games like this and where that enjoyment actually starts and stops. And I really liked Titanium Court because it made me seriously think about what it is I get out of games and why I play them and why I play them the ways in which I play them. I think it's really cool to examine stuff like that sometimes, especially, about any kind of art, but especially about video games because they're still a newer medium. And it's really neat to just get really philosophical with it. The writing's fantastic. The music's fantastic. It's very, very silly. You should all play Titanium Court. It's probably my favorite thing I've played this year so far.
Hey there, Grissom Morley here. I run the premier and probably only combination running and gaming blog, oneMoreRun.blog. If you're into at least one of those things, I hope you'll check it out. Otherwise, you can follow me on Blue Sky at GraysonMorley.com. My favorite game of 2026, at least so far, is Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. As much as I've enjoyed the HD 2D remakes, Reimagined is, for me, the ideal Dragon Quest experience. Something about the storybook style paired well with how I played it, slowly savoring it on my Switch 2, a little bit every day in handheld mode. On OneMoreRun.blog, I've compared Dragon Quest to a Zone 2 run. Keeping your heart rate in Zone 2, approximately 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, allows you to maintain your aerobic fitness without feeling overly fatigued. Put another way, it's your Goldilocks speed, neither too slow nor too fast. That's Dragon Quest to me. They're not hard games, really, and Reimagined in particular is fairly easy, especially with its quality of life improvements. But they engage at just the right level mechanically so that they can carry you along narratively. Which is where I want to end this, with a story beat that I continue to think about. At the outset of the game, the protagonist starts as a support character, whereas other RPGs might make you well-rounded or probably just strong. DQ7's protagonist starts with heals and buffs. I find it charming that the game asks you to pilot a support character instead of like a demon slayer. So much so that I played the rest of the game leaning into that trope, choosing classes that allowed me to support the cast of characters who walked the way with me. Maribel, the daughter of the mayor of Pilchard Bay, is with you for nearly every step of the journey. She's so curt, she shows up in the dictionary as an example of the adjective. There isn't anything Maribel fails to comment on. It's a trait that seems a bit cartoonishly emphasized until a late-game story beat where we see the pressure she is under as a daughter and the expectations placed upon her. A flashback reveals that long ago, Maribel confided in you that she felt trapped by the expectations of being the good daughter, of being the caretaker, of being everything that was thrust upon her by her class and gender. She feels trapped by her tutoring, her house, her dancing lessons and dolls. She just wants to be herself. Not her station in life, not the expectations thrust upon her. Her. Just her. Just Maribel. You promise her then to take her away from all this, should you ever get away, which, of course, as an adventuring hero, you make good upon. At a crucial point in the game, Maribel finds the expectations of caretaking imposed upon her once again. It seems for a moment that she will be taken away from the party in order to take care of an ailing family member. But you haven't forgotten your promise. And if, like me, you've been playing as a support character this whole time, as someone who mechanically lifts up those around you, you'll find that your vocation has become your calling. You need to support Maribel. You need to lift her up. And you do. You promised, after all.
My name is Cass Marshall. I'm a co-founder of Rogue.site, and this is my nomination for Earliest Game of the Year 2026. Cairn from The Game Bakers. Cairn is available on both PC and PlayStation, and it's best enjoyed with a controller. You take the role of Ava, a professional climber making her way to the untouched peak of Mount Kama. It's clear that she's less interested in meeting her sponsorship obligations and more driven by an intense love of the game. Karen followed 2025's Peak, the friend swap sensation also about climbing a mountain, and they do both scratch a similar itch. But while Peak is chaotic, with players dealing with outsized obstacles like torrential rainfall, pools of lava, and the risk of trusting your own team, Karen is a much more meditative experience. In order to climb, the player must control each of Ava's limbs, positioning her along each craggy cliff face. You'll know she's tired when her limbs start shaking and her breath comes faster, but luckily, she has pro-tier equipment, and she can pin herself onto the cliff face and even set up camp for the night in a nearly vertical environment. I cannot stress enough how elegant the climbing system is. As Ava makes her way up Mount Kama, the terrain changes and the conditions become more dangerous, but you are still propelling yourself forward step by shaking step. It's a system that almost feels Bennett Foddy-like in its fastidiousness, and there were certainly times I took an inelegant tumble down the mountain. But with time and patience, I learned to master the experience of piloting Ava, scouting out routes that she can expertly manipulate. For much of the game, the peak of Kama is so far out of sight that I didn't even think about my end destination. I was solely focused on shimmying up a corridor driven into the rock or testing my stamina across a sheer stretch of stone. There are games this year that have better writing than Cairn, or are more robust with features, or offer some kind of wild surprise that changes the board partway through. But Cairn stands out because it remains totally focused on being a climbing simulator. And it's also the perfect avenue for Ava's story, because she is a climber at heart. And that is not just what she is trying to do, it's who she is as a person. It's a story about a destination, and in order to tell it right, the game makers had to perfect the journey. I don't think there's any game that captures the struggle and triumph of climbing quite like Cairn, and it's an astonishing little gem that I think will stand the test of time, despite coming out in a year packed full of quality games.
Hey, this is Garrett Martin. I ran the games section at a place called Paste for a long time, and lately been writing for a bunch of different places. Although I mostly write about video games, I'm not here to talk about one of them, but about a pinball machine that is related to video games. Stern put out a Pokemon pinball game this year, back in, I think, February, and it does something none of the Pokemon video games have ever really done, which is appeal to me personally. Look, I was in my late teens when Pokemon hit over here, a little too old for it, and although I've dabbled in a lot of those games for work, the only ones that have ever really landed for me are the ones where you just sort of hang out with the little guys and not like run through a basic RPG or whatever. Stern's Pin is the most I've ever gotten into a Pokemon game, and not just because I love pinball, but because it captures the nature of what Pokemon's about, training these dudes, making them fight through the tried and true action of banging a metal ball around a big old table. Pinball can be way too complicated these days with machines like Game of Thrones or The Godfather having multiple characters or families to play as, where you have to pick your story before you even start the game, and you're kind of stuck doing that one path with its own goals and missions, and it's all just really overwhelming a lot of the time, especially if you're playing on location and don't have the luxury to just crank up a game whenever you want to. Pokemon keeps it smart and simple, though, treating the story modes with Pikachu and his pals as missions that you can start in-game by hitting shots, and not as like overarching character modes you have to choose before plunging the ball. In that way, it feels a lot like a pinball machine from the 90s, where any possible mission or story can be started during play, and then you progress through them by making shots. Only this one, it's got like the HD screen and the video clips from the cartoon series, the kinds of bells and whistles you'd expect from a modern pinball game. Now, pinballs were popular, that it's been in a few decades. It's still kind of an old person's game, and that's why most games you see are based on movies or bands that your dad or uncle are into. An interesting thing about this machine, though, is that it's pretty clearly an attempt at getting younger, newer players into pinball. And Stern did a really good job of making it accessible for them without being too simplistic for the old heads. But for me personally, it's also had the opposite effect, getting me more into Pokemon than I've ever been before. And I think that's going to be true for a lot of older folks who, can maybe only name Pikachu and one or two other Pokemon. It's getting us more familiar with what's become probably the most popular entertainment franchise in the world. Now, Pokemon, it's not the best recent pinball machine, but it's a genuinely great one that you should seek out, that does some interesting things. And hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Remember, if you don't know what you're doing, just shoot for the blinking lights.
Hi, Chris Plant and Post Games listeners. My name is Nico Stratus. I'm a writer out of Toronto. I wrote a book called The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman, and I read a newsletter called Anxiety Shark. And the game from 2026 I want to talk about is Perfect Tides, Station to Station by Meredith Gran. I believe her production company is called 3Bs. I could be wrong, but I feel like I'm right. And isn't that the most important thing? I really loved that first Perfect Tides game that she made. I've been a fan of Meredith's work for a long time. I read Octopus Pie, her webcomic, religiously. And I also grew up playing Sierra adventure games. And so playing that first Perfect Tides game was so perfect for me. And I was really so thrilled to hear that she was making a sequel. And the sequel really delivers on the promise of the first game. And also removes a lot of the craft of adventure games, the cycling through icons in order to do specific actions, and boils it down to the essence of the storytelling of it all. And something I really love with this game is, so Mara, your lead character, is going to school in the city after she's left her small town to become a writer. And as a writer myself, and as a culture writer myself, a mechanic in the game that I really love is, in order for her to write papers for school or whatever, as you have to in the game, as you're going to school, a thing I never did as a writer, is she has to go out and engage with the world around her. She has to talk to people. She has to have topics she's thinking about. She has to read other books. And everything that she absorbs in the world by nature of conversation or reading or engagement or whatever, it all informs the work that you do within the game. And you have to think about, when you're writing a paper, for instance, you have to say, okay, I'm writing this paper about this. Here's the topics that I'm going to meld together in order to make the point I'm trying to make. And those things come to you by talking to people, by asking them about their own experiences, their own thoughts, their own feelings on ideas and topics that you pick up as you engage with the world. It is incumbent on you to be part of the world in order to process it, in order to talk about it. And this is part of the work. This is so much of what I do as a writer, and so many people I know do as a writer. And I've never seen it portrayed so clearly as in this game, in this interactive environment. And I just think it's so incredible and beautiful. And, I love the time period that it's in, the early 2000s. I love that Meredith never tries to dress it up as something better than it was. I love that there's a moment where you meet somebody that has a sidekick. Kids, ask your grandparents about what a sidekick was. It was on season 3 of the OC once. I've been playing it on my Mac mostly, other than the few occasions where I play it on my Steam Deck. And I also tell my partner that I'm going to watch TV, and I can't do both because I can't play a really gripping narrative game where I have to be paying attention to my conversations so I can write fake papers for my fake writing class, and also watch something on TV. So mostly it's just been me on my Steam Deck sort of engrossed in the story, which who doesn't want to get lost in something beautiful right now? And that's my pitch for why you should all play Perfect Tides, Station to Station.
Hey there, my name is Mike Rugnetta. I make a podcast about the internet called Never Post, and a long-running cyberpunk tabletop actual play podcast called Fun City, and I am here to talk to you about plumbing. Okay, actually I'm here to talk to you about a game that has, I think as Chris put it, captured my heart this year. And before I tell you exactly what that game is, there's some stuff that I need you to know. I have like 3 jobs and a 3-year-old. So when I am sitting down to play a game, my tolerance for nonsense is, it's not just low, it's subterranean, especially for new games. I'm at a place where I want things to be interesting, and I need to feel like I'm making progress, like basically immediately. Otherwise, I'm just going to go right back to Caves of Cud. This has meant that my risk aversion for new games, especially early access games, which is what I'm about to tell you about, it has skyrocketed. However, Ryan Gilliam's review of Nova Roma over at rogue.site convinced me to give it a try, and I have been having the best time with like one corollary that we're going to get to in a minute. In Nova Roma, you're kind of like an unacknowledged demigod, I guess. You get the populace below shaking their fists at you when their insulas catch on fire, but then you also get Jupiter above shaking his fist when you don't throw him enough parties. But perhaps owing to the fact that I've seen this described as a cozy city builder, nothing too bad ever actually happens. My citizens get mad that they're tired because they live far away from where they work and they get sleepy. I mean, welcome to the club, guys. Neptune once threw a temper tantrum and destroyed one of the other gods' temples. I think they should just leave me out of it. The corollary that I mentioned is this. Eventually, at a large enough size, your city is going to need an aqueduct. And it is at this point that the game turns from a city builder to a plumbing simulator. For Aftermath, Luke Plunkett describes Nova Roma as a game about water, writing that building the water supply for your city is, quote, a game unto itself. And that is not, I want to be really clear, unfun, but it is not nearly as low key as the rest of the game. Like suddenly, Neptune wants a birthday party and you got to be like, take a seat, buddy. The elevation of this quarter-mile tract of aqueduct is too steep, so I have to reassign 36 laborers to regrade this hill so that I can make sure the bathhouse is operational. So I guess it's like there's just simply a very high-pressure public works game hidden inside the cozy city builder. But to the game's credit, I think it rises to this point very gracefully and gradually. Unlike the hill that my guys are currently chipping away at, I think had it front-loaded that aspect, I'd probably have walked away much sooner. But as it stands now, I'm having a great time. And it's in active development, so there are new things being fixed and added all the time. So it's great to, walk away for a week or two when I've just been really busy, come back and see all the new stuff that's been added. So highly recommend. Nova Roma on Steam. I play it on a Steam Deck and I have no issues. I love it.
Well, if it isn't me, Megan Frogmanesh, back on Chris Plant's podcast. In case you forgot who I am, Chris Plant, I am a writer, reporter, editor, kind of do-it-all journalist who mostly focuses on games, occasionally other things, but a lot of video games. So I would love to talk to you about my favorite game of 2026. Unfortunately, it is not very obscure. It's a Pokemon game, specifically Pokopia, that's kind of just like Animal Crossing, both Pokemon. We're going to put a pin in that because I actually will come back to it. But first, in case you haven't played it, Pokopia is about a Ditto who wakes up. All the humans have disappeared from Pokemon's lives. This Ditto manages to turn himself or herself or itself into a very creepy human-like creation who sometimes can turn into other Pokemon still. We won't get into it. It's a whole Cronenberg sort of nightmare with all the things it does with its body. But Ditto's job, with the help of this Tangela, I want to say. I should know this. I think it's a Tangela. Professor Tangela. He might not be a professor. I'm rambling. Please don't add that. Anyway, this is the best recording I've had so far. Please don't put this in like you did last time.
Hey everybody, a quick note. This is your host, Chris Plant. I am going to be including the entirety of Megan's message for a few reasons. 1, Megan is one of my favorite people. Number 2, Megan sends me voice memos just like this pretty regularly, and they are one of my favorite parts of the day, and I want you to be able to enjoy that experience also. And then 3, more of like a caveat, I want to be super clear here. I edit everyone's audio to try to make them sound as concise and as smart as possible. Megan's rambling, not unusual, but it is absolutely the funniest, and that is why my friendship stays.
Anyway, so basically this Ditto, with the help of another Pokemon, is trying to return this world, which is just a mess. It's like dry and dirty and covered in weeds into something other Pokemon want to come live in. So there are 4 different areas. You spend that time cleaning up those areas, creating habitats for Pokemon. Eventually they stop by and you get to like discover new Pokemon, and then you get to build stuff. And, you know, it's like I said, it's basically Animal Crossing. So for people who aren't familiar with Animal Crossing, you owe a lot of money to a raccoon for some reason. His name is Tom Nook. He will break your kneecaps if you don't pay him. So your job is to collect items and move in villagers and blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. I don't really like Animal Crossing. I know that's very unpopular. I find it really boring. I want to play it for like an hour and then I'm like, I'm done. The thing is, like, I just find it creepy. I think the villager is creepy. I don't like their beady little eyes. I think anytime I get, you know, a new Islander, the Islanders are cute. Sometimes they're like cute little animals. Sometimes they're like, there's a clown one, right? I don't like it. Either way, I don't like it. The point is just I'll get a new visitor and I'm just like, don't like you, because half the time I'm just like, I wish you'd move out. And then I make them move out. So back to Pokopia. The difference is that Nintendo has me by the fucking balls. They know me. They know I love nostalgia. They know I miss being a child with no responsibilities. And they know that Pokemon is going to get me. So every time a Pokemon pops up, I'm filled with childlike glee. Do you know how good it's been for me to run around with Bulbasaur on an island and be like, Bulbasaur, help me do this thing. You make these plants grow while I build a house for some reason for a Pokemon to live in. Again, this is not a great explanation of this game. You're going to have to trust me that it's good. God, you're going to get this recording and be like, why didn't I ask this bitch to do this? Okay, please cut that. Please, I'm just going to be screaming cut that every fucking time I send you recordings. I'm so sorry. I should not be on podcasts. Anyway, so the thing I love about Pokopia is the way that it combines the nostalgia and like special nature of Pokemon, where like everybody has their favorites, right? I am a diehard Bulbasaur stan. So every time I'm running around in Pokopia, you can have a couple Pokemon follow you, either to help you complete a task or just to hang out with you. Bulbasaur is always with me. That is my guy. I love him so much, and I always want to go hang out with him, and you can talk to them, and, he tells me how much he loves to hang out with me too. There's something about just the joy of getting a new Pokemon and having it suddenly be this Pokemon you can talk to and hang out with that I find really special. Just seeing how they react to things, running around to fulfill their needs, because they often want something added to their habitat, or, maybe it's like they want some food or they want a cool chair, and then you give them the chair and they are overjoyed, and it brings me so much happiness. Honestly, I love this game too, because I think you can just do so many like cool, creative things with it. I want to be clear that like I haven't. My towns, if you want to call them, my little villages are so bad. It's like 2 houses that I've stuffed like 5 Pokemon in, and like there's no reason they should all fit in there. There's like one bed that I imagine they have to fight over, but for some reason they're all like, yo, we love this place. It's great. They'll have like different little personalities. It's cool. And then the stuff I've seen from people, like people have made cities, they've made recreations of Hyrule, they've made like special beautiful environments for specific types of Pokemon, and I just think that's so cool. I think that while I'm having just a shanty town of Pokemon living in absolute despair but somehow being like, thanks Ditto, you're the best, people are creating these like amazing, wonderful, beautiful things. It is so time consuming. I don't know how they do it, but it's wonderful. In general, I think this game is great. It just makes getting little tasks done feel so good, whether it's like pulling weeds or watering stuff. I love to go collect vegetables. I love to harvest, which I've never been much of a farmer person or farming simulator person, but like, damn, I love to harvest a little tomato in Pokopia. The game is only available on Switch 2, which honestly works perfectly for me because I am so much a person who wants to be able to play stuff on a plane or in bed. Like, I honestly don't enjoy doing a lot of TV gaming, and for the way you kind of can pop in and out of this game, I think the Switch 2 is perfect for it. You know what I really love about this game? I like that so much of it is very mundane. Like, you are, adding in roads block by block. You are building little habitats, which means you have to get a very specific item to put next to another very specific item at a specific place. When I talk about this, it does not sound fun, and yet there is something so satisfying of just slowly building up communities, homes, whatever, wild environments, weird Pokemon bathhouses, whatever you want to make, and watching it kind of grow day by day. I also have to say, like, this is the first game where I play it every single day, because it is a game where there are daily quests and challenges, and I like to log on. I like to see what new stuff I can buy. So even if I don't have time to play it, I log on for like 10 minutes and I like buy a recipe for a rug, and it makes me so happy. I think it probably just appeals to me being in my 30s. I do love to organize things. It's kind of like, I live in New York and I can't have a big apartment or a big house or anything, but I can be in Pocopia making an insane home where I've painted the walls. Another thing I can't do in New York. So basically, moral of the story, I think you should play Pocopia. I think that you should tell me all about the things you make. Honestly, you should send me pictures of it so I at least can have something to aspire to. Because, again, shantytown. I start projects and then I kind of just forget them, which honestly feels a lot like me in real life. Real true to me. Really could not recommend this game enough.
Yo, what's up? This is Blessing Adeoye Jr. from Kinda Funny. And when Chris reached out to me to talk about my favorite game of 2026 so far, immediately one game came to mind. It's a game that I played a few months ago and I absolutely fell in love with, but it's a game that is definitely far from being the most popular game of the year. It is a racing game with a narrative aspect to it called Screamer. Screamer is a revival of a classic racing game franchise from decades ago at this point. And this version of the game is nothing like the old versions of the game. This version of the game is narrative, story forward. It has an anime aesthetic to it. It has cutscenes in a visual novel story mode called The Tournament that amps the stakes and everything going on within this racing narrative that they present you with. That's the first thing that happens when you boot up the game for the first time. They throw you right into the story mode, not even the main menu. You are playing as these characters that are competing in a racing tournament being thrown by seemingly an ultra billionaire. There's an obscene amount of money that's on the line here, like billions and billions of dollars that are on the line here that these teams of 3 are racing for. And I really, really dig this game for multiple reasons. One, the story is really good. The story is really enjoyable. It is fully voice acted. The visual novel parts of the game don't get too long between races. I think it's paced immaculately where you never really get tired of reading what's going on. And once the story really kicks into gear, it really gets really good in a way where I'm like, I could not stop playing. I could not stop being enthralled by what was going on moment to moment within this racing tournament. The stakes get amped up. The character dynamics get really interesting. It starts off pretty like, okay, cool, everybody's here racing. And then it turns into a thing where I cared a lot about the character relationships, the character dynamics, people from different teams, because these teams are made up of characters with different backgrounds. And so you have a team that is basically a Yakuza-like criminal organization. You have another team that are these evil CEOs. You have another team that are these military mercenaries. And then you have another team that's straight up just a pop group. They all come together in this racing tournament that goes to ridiculous places as far as what they are doing narratively. The racing mechanics here are so interesting because this game is very clearly a game that was made by devs that have worked on previous racing games, particularly sim racers. And so there's some elements to this where this game is an arcade racing game, like it is a game that is about boost and about high speed and all this, but you're having to manually gear shift every single time your car hits that next gear. And that's not something I'm used to because I'm not that big of a sim racer person, but I love arcade racers. But it really works for this game because every single time you gear shift, that then boosts your boost meter, essentially, right? That fills that meter so that you can now use your boost and go even faster. But then every single time you use that boost ability that's mapped to holding a button, I think it's mapped to either R1 or L1. Once you use that then fills a second meter. That is your strike meter. And what the strike does is it burnout style allows you to run into other drivers and take out their vehicles and they explode and it's a whole thing. And then like this system of gear shifting to fill your boost to then fill your strike and then take out people to then fill your boost again and have all these things working in tandem gets really fun, let alone the special abilities for each of the characters and the different kind of cars they're driving. It just does every single thing that I want for a game that is it seems equally inspired by Speed Racer as it is the more technical racing games. And so I fell in love with the game. I think it's one of the best games of the year, and I can't recommend it more. I played the game on PlayStation 5. I believe it's available on PS5, PC, and Xbox, and there's not much more to say about it. Go play Screamer.
So listen, I know that most of you do not know who I am, but my name is Moises, and I think I'm your favorite critic's favorite critic. You've probably seen my byline in places like Kotaku and GameSpot, as well as every incarnation of Paste Games over the last few years. I do a lot of writing online, and I'm trying to do a little bit more at my own website called Underleveled these days. You can't like it, you can't subscribe to it, I don't have a newsletter for you, and there's not a shiny podcast for you to listen to. But if you wind up liking anything that I say here and you think that I'm smart, you can follow me on Blue Sky at Platano Ranger, and I promise to keep you posted about anything that I'm working on there. Capiche? Cool. I'm here now, though, because Chris was kind enough to invite me to talk about my favorite game of 2026 so far, which is Bungie's new extraction shooter, Marathon. Marathon's an extraction shooter where you and a crew of 2 other players are dropped into a hostile map full of AI enemies and other crews of players. You're all tasked with surviving at all costs. Sometimes that means shooting everything that you see and looting it for what it's worth. Other times that means forging unlikely alliances with random people online and just trying to make out the best gear that you can scavenge. There's a lot of fun to be had looting, shooting, and negotiating Marathon, but what's made it stand out to me in 2026 are the game's incredible environments. In the games industry, we've coined a phrase that's meant to capture all the quirks that make Bungie's first-person shooters titans of the field. We call it Bungie Magic. Bungie Magic can be the feeling of firing a weapon, it can be the physics of a vehicle, the flavor of the game's storytelling, or the skybox of a level. In Marathon, I feel Bungie's magic the most in the construction and design of the maps, as well as the history that they seem to hold. For example, I really love Outpost, one of Marathon's more challenging maps. It's dark and it's stormy, there's patrols of hostile enemies all over the place, the sky rains fire on occasion just because. There's no smooth jazz playing, but when I'm on Outpost, it feels a lot like skulking through the streets of New Mombasa in Halo 3 ODST and just trying to survive getting from point A to point B. Perimeter, Marathon's beginner map, has a natural environment and a skyline that invites the player to discover a whole new world. And that feels quintessentially Halo. That's touching down on the ring for the first time, seeing the curvature of the structure, and wondering if I'm going to be able to see everything that the skybox kind of teases. It's a philosophy that you see all over the Destiny franchise, from the earliest destinations to the latest morsels of endgame content. Dire Marsh recalls the symmetry and hostility of stepping into a Halo 2 match and immediately getting domed right out of spawn. Cryo Archive, Marathon's endgame map, looks a lot like Deepstone Crypt, one of Destiny's best raids, and likely rivals it in complexity. Everywhere you look in Marathon, there's traces of Bungie's DNA and lineage, and I love being surrounded by it. Each of the maps is rich with the learnings, the lessons, and the distinguishing marks of the team. Each one of them feels like tripping through Bungie's history of legendary shooters. I see a rock formation in Marathon, and I feel like I'm being flanked by Covenant grunts all over again. Other times, I feel like I'm being surrounded by fallen vandals. Bungie magic has taken a lot of shapes and forms over the years, but here, it feels most apparent in Marathon's ability to make whole worlds of arenas, usually without saying a word. To me, that's what makes runs of Marathon so incredibly worthwhile, and I hope that that continues to be true for a long time to come.
Hey, it's Casey Newton from Platformer, and the game that I have been playing a ton this year is Marvel Cosmic Invasion on the Switch. You know, I grew up hundreds of years ago playing these arcade cabinet style games with like the Avengers and the Simpsons, and they always had these fun beat 'em ups. But the problem was that you had to put in a new quarter every time you died, and you died, about every 14 seconds. And I didn't, have that many quarters because I was 8. But what's great about Marvel Cosmic Invasion is that it kind of takes that format and that art style, and it just gives it a little bit of a modern update, and you just play the game on your Switch, and so effectively you have infinite quarters. This game has so many fun things going for it. They have a huge roster, both sort of familiar characters that you've probably played in other games, like Spider-Man or Captain America. But then they have characters that you don't see as much, right? When was the last time you played as Beta Ray Bill or Phyla Vel? Right? So they're kind of, plumbing the depths of the Marvel roster. All of the characters have unique move sets. There's like a surprising amount of depth in the combat if you want to go there. But you can also just mash buttons and you'll probably be fine. And so it really just kind of can flex to whatever kind of experience you want. You want to sit down and play it for a couple hours, go for it. But you could also play it for 15 minutes and probably have a good time. So these are all good things. Super fun game. They just came out with a DLC like the week that I'm recording this. And so you can now play as the Thing and Cyclops. And guess what? That's really fun too. So it's a fun, stupid game. And it made me feel like I was 8 again. And what more do I want from a video game right now? Not very much.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Pettit, managing editor of Kotaku. And I'd like to talk to you about Perfect Tides Station to Station. The game is available on Steam, which is where I played it. It's listed as playable on Steam Deck, though I didn't play it on Steam Deck. It's also now available on Switch. In the simplest terms, this is a point-and-click adventure, though I think it does some quite exciting things with that form, and notably, and deservedly in my opinion, it won the Excellence in Narrative Award at this year's IGF Awards. It is written and designed by Meredith Gran, who, prior to creating this game and its predecessor, the original Perfect Tides, ran the online comic Octopus Pie. And it's really her writing and the complex humanity this game is infused with that makes it so extraordinary. Now, there are big, flashy moments in this game, a show-stopping sequence at a karaoke night for one, but rather than highlighting one of the game's biggest moments, I want to focus on one of its smallest details. So, you play as Mara Whitefish, an 18-year-old college student in 2003, living in a lightly fictionalized version of New York City. One day, Mara and her friends take a trip outside the city to a party at the home of a writer. And at this party, there are people Mara knows well, people she's loosely connected to, and people she doesn't know at all. Among these people she doesn't know is a family, a couple with 2 young kids who are playing in the yard. At some point, Mara and her friends leave to go swimming nearby, and when you return to the party, night has fallen and that family is gone. However, a new detail in the environment may catch your eye. A row of toy animals, neatly organized near a clothesline. Examine it, and Mara observes, quote, "Beneath the idyllic clothesline sits an entire ark's worth of miniature animals, each positioned in line with the greatest deliberation." And that's it. That's the detail I wanted to tell you about. But why does this detail strike me the way it does? Well, Station to Station, far more than most games, I would say, focuses on interiority, on Mara's experience of the world. We understand that Mara is made up of desires and insecurities, that she's grappling with things about herself and the world, that every book she reads, every film she sees, every new experience she has is in some way expanding her sense of who she is or what she wants or what the world is. But even most games that give us a central character who feels distinct, complex, sometimes even contradictory, stumble, I think, when it comes to the characters in that person's orbit. In other words, it's very rare, in my experience anyway, to encounter a game in which the supporting characters feel like they have as much interiority, as much inner life, and as much complexity as the protagonist. But not so in Perfect Tides Station to Station. As you live through Mara's 2003, dating people and breaking up, admiring your college professors and clashing with them, encountering new ideas in books and trying to find your own voice as a writer, it's very apparent that all the people you come in contact with are real and alive and complicated too. They too have their own desires, fears, ideological convictions. For Meredith Gran, even those children in the background at that party have intellects and impulses. They too are learning what it is to try to make sense of the world, to try to arrange things in ways that make sense, to express themselves and figure out who they are and how they can be a person in this world, what that means, what that entails. To me, this little throwaway moment, a detail you can easily miss and that will have no effect whatsoever on how the overall story plays out, is a kind of synecdoche for the entire game. It's a small expression of the fact that Station to Station is deeply committed to the complex interiority of not just protagonist Mara Whitefish, but all of its characters. This is a remarkable game about how, whether we're reading a book or watching a film or having a conversation, life happens when our sense of self comes into collision with the ideas, the desires, and the creative expression of others.
Okay, so this is Yusuf Cole. I am on Blue Sky at UMU, and I'm a New York Times games critic. I also run Bullet Points Monthly. I am going to talk about a video game Better Than Dead. It is a PC game just released in early access a few weeks ago. And that game currently stands out to me as my most memorable game of the year because it is employing an aesthetic that has come out more so in recent years of the body cam, which is ultra realistic looking video style video games that are shooters that have a lot of camera shake and are meant to elicit the feeling of actually being in a shooter. There are games like Ready or Not and Unrecorded, I think, are the other two big ones that are using that aesthetic. And for some reason, Better Than Dead stood out to me over these other genre examples because of setting and tone. It's set in a kind of 80s style Hong Kong, very much in the influence and homage to action movies from Hong Kong in the 80s and 90s, kind of the John Woo set. And it also approaches shooting very differently because you basically play as a trafficking victim who has been given a gun by some mysterious savior figure and then set loose to take revenge on the people who have trafficked her and have trafficked other women around the city. There's a short campaign, I think about 2 hours, and you can spend it basically running around and murdering a bunch of small-time criminals and kind of mafia types in different settings. You could feel the early access because the narrative isn't that elaborate. It's really just as simple as that. But I think that also works to its benefit. It's very much about feeling and emotion and energy and less about crafting a specific narrative. It gives you the easy impetus of seeking revenge and rescuing other women, and then you kind of sets you off to go. And on top of that, it's incredibly dynamic and frightening because it's relatively realistic. You can't get shot more than once. The damage just seems very interesting. If you get shot, you start to stumble and you can't aim as well anymore. So it creates a new level of challenge. You already couldn't aim well at all, which is the main kind of conceit of the game, is you're not like a soldier. So you're kind of running through the room and just waving your gun around and firing nearly blindly. But there is a rhythm or there is a sense to the madness, and there is like a way to aim, which is very interesting. Sort of a sixth sense about if you're going to hit a guy or not. And it feels very innovative for a shooter, I think, because it really highlights the violence of the shooter, and it also creates a setting in which that violence makes sense. Like it's not like Uncharted where you're killing 100 guys and then quipping the next minute. So there's no ludonarrative dissonance. This is a violent and awful world, and many of the levels are basically dungeons and torture chambers that you're going into and rescuing victims from. So there's parody and a consistency in the action and the behavior and the tone and the aesthetic. And it's just a really interesting and often frustrating and often challenging, but a game that absolutely sticks in my craw. And I keep thinking about it, especially as an example of where shooters can develop, not just aesthetically and tonally, but also in what kind of story they tell and how they use their mechanics to support that story. Thank you.
Hi, this is Stephen Totillo of the GameFile newsletter, and my favorite video game of the first half of 2026 is something called Tiling Forest. It's a puzzle game, and there's a decent chance you haven't heard of it, but I really hope you'll track it down. Technically speaking, it's a demo for an upcoming game called Tiling Town, but it's not like the first levels of Tiling Town. It's a standalone kind of preview, appetizer of what that larger game will be like. It's great on its own, though. Really, I can't urge you strong enough. Don't hold off for the full game. Just try this right now if you have access. Again, Steam, the developer is Matsubo Games. I played on a Steam Deck. So what is it? It's a puzzle game that, like a lot of my favorite puzzle games, doesn't tell you the rules. It teaches you the rules by you trying to solve the puzzles, getting stumped, suddenly realizing there's this one kind of weird thing I could try. Wait, that's opened up my mind to a whole new way of solving these puzzles. This one is all about creating this winding dirt road through a forest. How does it work? Picture an overhead view of a forest, pretty graphically simple. You can see trees, you can see grass. You can also see hints of a dirt road. And most importantly, parts of this forest you're looking down on are not filled out. They are just white and gray checkerboard squares. Now picture at first you're looking at this checkerboard zone. That's where you're going to fill out the missing parts of the road. Maybe on the left side of that grid, you see the beginning of a dirt road. And maybe you see the next part of that dirt road on the right side of that grid. You were given some square tiles. On those tiles are pieces of road, stretches of road, maybe a straight line, maybe a curve. And with those tiles, you're going to connect that left part of the road and that right part of the road. At first, it's simple. You just connect point A to point B with a line, straight line right across. You don't even use up all of the grid. There you go. The game moves on, gives you the next open patch, shows you what parts of the road you're connecting, gives you the tiles, you do it again. Bit by bit, though, the challenges get more complicated. They're not giving you every possible piece that you could want. The pieces that you have are limited, and you begin to have to figure out, well, I really could have used a piece that curves up, but I only have pieces that curve down. What do you do? Well, maybe you begin to discover some of the tricks of how this game actually works. That's fine. It's fun. It's sort of, okay, I'm kind of connecting the dots here. I'm making this cool looking road. I wouldn't be recommending you this game if that's all there was. No, you soon discover there's a whole second way they want you to solve each of these empty grid, connect the road puzzles, and that is to use every single square. Fill out each one. Make the windiest roads possible. And actually, sometimes you discover there's ways to make side roads. There's ways to make almost little racetracks and other pieces of terrain that you're going to fill out in order to fill out the grid. And so you realize every puzzle doesn't just have one solution, connecting point A to point B. It has, or it wants, a whole second solution, which is to fill out the whole grid. So you do that. The game is challenging. You discover all these new rules. It gets more and more complicated, clever, satisfying to play. And you get near the end. And I'm not going to spoil it, but if you've been playing the demo or the game, Tiling Forest, by this point, there may be something you've noticed as you've been playing, something that maybe it's just a graphical thing, maybe there's just kind of a weird visual quirk that they've decided to put in there. But you get near the end and then you discover, no, that thing you noticed, that thing I'm sure you will notice when you play, was actually a hint that there's a third way they want you to solve each puzzle. A third way that is so much more amazing, ingenious, and clever when you realize how the game actually is meant to work. I thought I was done with Tiling Forest. I thought I'd rolled credits, as it were. And then I discovered, actually, no, I really had just started the game. There's an amazing moment that you have when you figure this out. I don't want to spoil it. I recommend you play it. It's the coolest, most interesting new puzzle game I've played. Well, I was going to say in a long time, but Blueprints was not that long ago, and that was pretty great too. But this is fantastic. Strongly recommend it. Tiling Forest. Play it soon.
Hi, I'm Matthew Gallant. I'm a game director at Naughty Dog, currently working on Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. There have been many great games released so far in 2026, but I'd like to give a special shout out to the game that won the Seamus McNally Grand Prize this year at the IGF. That game is Titanium Court, developed by AP Thompson. The premise of the game is that you have stumbled into the world of fairies and somehow unwittingly became the queen of their court. The court is seemingly at war, and it is therefore your job to lead them to victory. Titanium Court blends several game genres in a way that's tricky to describe succinctly. It's most obviously a match-3 puzzle game, where matching tiles generates resources for a real-time strategy game. The clever twist is that the state of the tiles at the end of the puzzle becomes the field for the ensuing battle. It's therefore important to set up your court strategically. For example, enemy catapults are neutralized when your court is hidden behind mountains. These short rounds of Match 3 plus RTS live within a larger structure of a roguelike campaign, where you lead the court through a series of escalating battles, building strength and resources, and of course culminating in a boss fight. This blend of genres is really fresh and creative and well-designed, but it's actually not the main reason I want to recommend Titanium Court. What's truly exceptional about this game is its narrative metagame. Between runs, you return to the court to speak to your courtiers and explore the grounds. This mini-adventure game is really fun and wonderfully written, in an absurdist, comic style that you might compare to Monty Python, or even perhaps A Midsummer Night's Dream. I love when the game loops back on itself to integrate Match 3 mechanics back into the narrative moments in unexpected ways. There's this great recurring shower thoughts sequence that you advance by matching thought bubbles and soap bars. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that the game has this beautiful psychedelic clip art aesthetic, and it's extremely playful with its minimalism. This is all matched by a surreal, laid-back, dreamy, kind of surf rock soundtrack. It's all guitar riffs with heavy reverb. It's really great. Finally, Chris also asked us to mention what platform we're playing on. So I'll briefly mention that I'm playing a PC copy of Titanium Court on a retro handheld Android device running an open source emulation app called Game Native. This has been my new obsession lately. Shout out to anyone else who has also gone down this particular rabbit hole in 2026. Thanks.
And that is a wrap on the first annual EGOTYs. Much like all great award shows, we went pretty long. Next week, what the hell is happening with video games? Especially those AA and AAA video games. Is all of this normal? I spoke with maybe the one person who could answer that question. Rob Pardo is the former CCO of Blizzard and the current CEO of Bonfire, and has seen all of the changes that the video game industry has gone through dating back to the mid-1990s. It is a really enlightening conversation about how, well, the games industry is always sort of a mess. And is this a different mess? You'll have to listen to find out. Until then, a reminder, post-game supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, usually way earlier, like 5 a.m. Eastern. This week, Patreon listeners got my top 10 games of the year so far, right smack dab in the middle of the show. Plus, each month, subscribers get a bonus episode in my ongoing series, Past Games, in which I share deep dive histories into the gaming anniversaries of 2026. We just did an episode on the history of Batman video games. We're about to do an episode on the history of Tomb Raider. You're going to want to check it out. And no ads on anything. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games. Post Games logo by James Bareham, theme by Mark Sparling, and a special thank you to all of this week's guests. Like the show, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or just share it with a friend. And that, my friends, is it. I'll see you next week.